ክንገብሮ ንኽእል እንታይ እዩ ካብ ተመክሮ ወሲድና ከምዚ ዓይነት ዝተፈላለዩ ፎረማት አይ ቲንክ ወደፊት ሴትአፕ ትግበሩ አለው ዝብል እምነት አለን። ያው ተጋሩ we are very optimistic enough, you know, it's good optimistic enough. Again, we have to be more optimistic even. Anto ካብ መዋዕል ወሰድዎ ነገር if you want to be successful, appreciate the success, you know. በጣም I think ደስ በለኒ ማለት እዩ እና ሐሙል ምግባር ግን ዙ ፕላትፎርም ክልል ነው ዙ አሬና ክልል ነው for example North Bridge Connect ዝበሃል ድርጅት አለና ካብ ፎረም ዚ ካብ ዋዕላ ለወፃኢ ዋዕላ መጀመሪያ ክጅምር ከሎ I think አነ እውን aware ነኝ I used to hear a lot of stuff ምናምንና just መጀመሪያ ታይ ነሩ just አባይ ትግራይ ነሰባሰብ ድብል ሐሳብ ይወደመስ ካዙ አላ ፈርመሰ ተፋለ ኮሚቴታት ተፈጥረን ማለት ነው ተፋለ ኮሚቴታት ተራኸለዋል ዛዓዊ ሐሳብ ሰል ጀመርና ይልና ካቶም ሓደ ኖርዝ ብሪጅ ኮኔክት ዩ I don't know how many of you are investors or you know about it. I'm sure you do. I'll get new formula. One way the new thinking, new generation course I have the አይነት ናይ ተጋሩ ኢኒሺዬቲቭ ተሳቲፉ ክመጽእ ከሎ ሐሳቡ ክገልጽ ከሎ ideas bring more ideas. It's like it's the other way too. Problems bring more problems. So once we start get together like this, we have more frequent forums about business and stuff. We generate one new idea, then it brings another idea. I think it's also how continuity kill ማለት ብዙ ሐዚ አውዲቶሪ ደብላው ወልዑ አነ ደስ ካብለን ባህሪው they like actions, you know, they want to see like moving forward, right? So like you call a meeting, you discuss about it, you have ideas now. So when you come the next week, I mean, you don't do the same thing again, you know, right? You have to progress from that now. How many culture level generations I was ተፈጥረን ነው እና ዝንገሮ ሴታፑ ለአቶት ክምጥን ከሆነ ሉሱሲ ከሰናገድ ለገብር ፎርማት or workshop ክልዩ አለው ይላል እና ሐምዲያ ተገርና I think we can bring our brothers and sisters who born and raised in America or in Europe to Tigray. Malasi, I think we're lucky. Na itagaru diplomacy pottery more or less. Auditori doblawe already pick up their moment. So that shows you if there is action, they can actually do more. I think we lucky that thank you.
Great, awesome, thank you so much. We'll do one of you can speak on this, and we're going to ask one more question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience because we have about 10 minutes left. So, you picked the mic first. Go ahead.
Okay. I think main thing is has what I you. كل ነገር ካብ ገዛ ኃይል ጅምር. So Mr. Malawi አንቶ ይተውሶኔ. We need to encourage the kids. Empower government በለለና እንደህር ከሙዜ ገበርናየው to fear overtake them and not have to go ወዝለ ከገበሩ ተፈጥሮ ማለት ነው. So one ናይ ባሪ personal experience ከነገርኩም ማለት እና ወደይ 18 ዓመት is freshman of college እና he's a sneaker hobbyist. sneaker ገዛ ሙሉ sneaker ይዘው Rumu ta'atina ማለት እና he told me I learned a lot from him እና basically he showed me how you can turn a used shoes into a profit. And it is just you know the other thing that I learned is how the niche market works. All he has to do is like is in his phone. And you know he has this website Nike, Adidas, Galamela auction and then he knows what kind of brand you know is demanded in the market. So he picks up, so, you know, initially I told him, this is not gonna work. Used shoes is not gonna work. Who's gonna buy used shoes? But he proved me wrong. And now, let them do, you know, encourage me to go wrong. Visible, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we're going to ask one more question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So think of creative questions to ask these experts. But this is something that I always think is interesting. In our community, a word that I think people get a little worried about is debt. D-E-B-T. How we deal with owing people money, because we're people that care so much about our word, our reputation. I think we try to stay away from ever owing people. And no community in this country has ever really advanced without access and availability to cheap debt. So how do you think we as a community can leverage debt to buy more assets, to build assets? What is the best way that we can utilize it as a people? You're the expert in this.
كرمية أفتنا يعطوا حنتنا قرد راح كونا يبعلي أوضاع مسمتاهو زحلفكو تمكرو مالت أنا أقول له معك انتهي الأمن إكسل ندحر زي غيره أنا أوضاعتي ترقون زلوه راح تهلونا يغير اللي ليدا هذي تاي مالتي إكسل خم هاجر كان دوغينها ካልኦት ዝድርቱ ነገራት ስለዘለዉ ኣይኩል ቢሮ ዝድርቱ ነገራት ስለዘለዉ ኣነ ሓደ ፃዕዳን ኣብ ሓደ ስራሕ ኢንተርቪው ጌርና ቴክኒካሊ እንድሕር ማዕረ መፂና ትፃዕዳን ከተመረፀ ኣነ ኣይገርመንን ኢለ ስለዚ ነፃዕዳ ክወልፆ እንተኮይነ ኤክሰል ክገብረለን ኢለ ሓደ እዋን عند جزاي انترفيو نيروان حدا سرح حر تسعان حمشتن نعم سمعنا حمشتن كم زر هبت نقرأ انديت وليا حر بحيتو خما يكون فتنان فلانت له هاي حلفكم أوين أنا مع عرفتنا كم زغني ترى هو يدرن اكسل هاي اكسل كذا ندهر زي بليش كيو نسخن حالة عدد معرض البلد ونسوالها ويمكن تأتي مؤمنات كأكسنت سمع زوعلو تأتي مؤمنات كحشاو كتسوي زوعلو هاي تمرد اكسل ذو النقل نعينا فلا وتعد مثلنا يهود فيلوسوفي موتا اكسل ذو النقل أو كله قد مرئة تبقى فلا ambition vision فوكس مسار عيد نقل لك كما هاجر يسريها كما هاجر كان سريها ما هاجر كان ده اكسل يرتاجل كما هاجر كان نقل ما حصلوا مثلا النقع وين حدا غفت عن توزلنا يرجم غفت عن توزلنا الجمهور ديمانتيو ديسيبلين زغنة ناي فاينانس على أنا تحساسبان اللي حيث كامتي غائب أو شاف حدا ناي بيزنس أوبورتينيتي سلادرخوكا راح سوي اللي مالته يكونن سو عن تولو لنا سوبرفايزر سيفينج أكاونت سكيور كريديت كارد زويل من بعد كالي ناتنا كالتشر زي روتيتين كريديت اند سيفينج اسوسيشن حكومة يقول عقوبون مباركة أنا عملت عقوبون مباركة حدا بوليس حدا وان لحدثنا نقرأكم صغار والدبي غايتني نبرا وخوايكم مساهو كم يقرأوا من بازوناتكم كوميونيتي زغلو غاز ستيشن 7-11 ليكر ستور لما نزل حزوة زلوزي هاي مسؤول هاي مازحتهم ريفيجهم يقولوا يولا وين سيمبل حدا قال 10 ساعات من عليهم السحو قال أي عقوبات هو حتى يشتري ريستوران الذي أسيب يقولوا تاسيب تدوروا وعمل 3 شهر 5 شهر تقول تغير كفريندز إن فاميليز حدا 3-4 شهر ويكا 10 شهر وصيهم تأكيد تبهر 100 شهر غيرهم من 400 شهر نحن 100 شهر بيزنس أو نيجو دوري فور انفورميشن ደቂ ቻይና ደቂ ኮርያ ኣውዚ ባንኪ ናይ ባዕሎም ኣሜሪካ ሓቂ ተጣየሸ ባንኪ ገይሮም እዮም ቶም ደቂ ኮርያን ቻይናን ተኣሽሙ ዝገቡ ከም ንእስራኤል ከም ንህንድ ግን ከምኡ ኣይኮነን እንታዓንተ ዝበልኮ ፋሚሊ ኤንድ ፍሬንድስ እውን ሓደ ግዜ ድማ እንታይ ትገብር እቲ ኢንተረስት ሬት ክባር ትወልድ ክባር ስለ ዝኾነ ጥራሕ ኣቮይድ ዝገብሩ ኖ ROI ዝበሃል ኣሎ ክንደይ ፐርሰንት እዩ ክረኽበሉ 25% እንድሕር ትርፊ ትረኽበሉ ኮይንካ 15%
ትግራይ ግሎባል ቸምበር ኦፍ ኮሜርስ ካብ ጣይሽ ሓደ ዓመት ገይሩ ኣሎ we have ዓበይቲ ፕላናት እኒአውና ማለት እዩ ኣብ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ፎከስ ዝገበረ ኣብ ካልኦት እውን ዝተፈላለዩ ሴክተራት ዝተገበረ መፅናዕትታት እኒኦ ማለት ክታዛርቡና ትደልዩ ብዙ እኒአና ማለት እዩ ሶ ቤዚክሊ እቲ ናይ ቸምበር ዋና ዓላማታ እዩ ከመይ ጌርና ናይ ተጋሩ ኢኮኖሚ ቢውል ክንገብር ንኽእል እዩ So basically, how do we circulate the money within ourselves? How do we, connect, not to network, business to business, business to our community. Not the عقم ذلكم especially مناسي. Now the chamber is the participated to go more. I think having not to experience share or not to govern, that's all I. بدنب أبصق خناتات مالت أبصق خناتات خللنا منتان تتصاتفوا يعد مالتي personally ترخونات خليهم يا مسكين يا غني اللي thank you.
So I'll be your moderator today. I'm Fidela Casa from Seattle, Washington. I'm here also on behalf of the Advocacy community of Seattle. So here representing them as well. And I'm going to introduce our lovely panelists here. Today I am joined by Memher Zuriyash Amare. Zuriyash Amare was born and raised. So she was born and raised in Tigray, but currently lives in Colorado. She used to be a teacher in Tigray. She went to school for teaching at Debre Birhan and is using that in the Bay Area. She's fluent in Spanish, English, Tigrinya, and Amharic. She has personal experience to what war does for families at an early age. And since the war in Tigray, she is always engaged in advocating for the people of Tigray, using mainstream media. She writes articles in Spanish and it does a lot of advocacy work in Spanish, which I think is phenomenal. She supports organizations operating to help alleviate some of the catastrophic humanitarian consequences for this war on Tigray, and always finding ways to connect her Tigrayan heritage to the rest of the world. She has a master's in hospitality and tourism from the University of Rovira, Virgili, Spain. She has her master's in Spain, y'all. And she also has her bachelor's in business management from Bahardar University. She worked as a teacher out there. She's certified in Spanish healthcare. And she's certified as a bilingual QBS Spanish and Alta language services. So please give it up for that. Amazing. All right, and last but not least, I also have the amazing Samhal Girmay with me. You all know her, she's phenomenal. Samhal is a leader in the Colorado Tigrayan community. She helped organize local and national protests in New York, DC, LA, San Francisco, and countless other cities. She's a representative of the Tigrayan community of Denver, and through her advocacy work, she's always connecting the diaspora to our families and friends in Tigray using social media campaigns like Tigray to Tigray. We all remember those videos that we made for our families. That was her, and she's also launching various fundraising initiatives such as the National Car Bash. She's also sells those Makata dresses that we all love, and the live auction. And she has that Tigray versus everybody suit you guys saw yesterday. That was also her. She creates high quality merch with her line Tigray to Tigray to raise more awareness through fashion. So please give it up for someone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and have some questions lined up for the panelists, after which I'm going to open it up to the floor. So keep thinking about what you guys want to ask this lovely group of ladies up here. But the first question that I want to ask you guys is, how did you guys become involved in the community, and what obstacles did you guys face? And that's open to everyone.
Okay. Let me start, and it's gonna go. How I started to work in a community is I always think about my Tigray plus my people in diaspora. How are we living? Of course, we are hardworking. ሰራሕተኛታትና በትግርኛ ይዝኳን ወዲዓይናተ ሰራሕተኛታትና ካልኣይ ከዓ ብጣዕሚ ክሎዝ ኢና ኣብ ፀገምና ኣብ ተሓጓስናን ብሓደ ኢና ግን ክንሰርሖ ከለና ኮሌክቲቭ ተዝኸውን ዝብል እምነት ነይሩኒ ማለት ኦርጋናይዝ ዝኾነ መንገዲ ካልእ ብተወሳኺ ኣብ ኣሜሪካ ወይ ከዓ ኣብቲ ዲያስፖራ ኮንካ ክትነብር ከለኻ ካብቲ ከባቢ ካብቲ ጋቨርንመንት ካብ ዝተፈላለየ ኣንፈት ዝርከብ ባዕልና ሰሪሕና ገንዘብ እና ታክስና ከፈልና ዘይረኽቦ ብዙሓት ነገራት ስለ ዝነበሩ ኮሚኒቲ ኦርጋናይዝ እንተኮይና ግን ዝብል እንታይ ስሙ ሒዘን ብዙሕ ግዜ ይሓስብ ስለ ዝነበርኩ ኣብ ፅቡቅ ኣጋጣሚ ኣብ ኮሎራዶ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲ ተዋሲኦ ማለት እዩ ፅቡቅ ተንቀሳቂስና ከምዚ በፂሕና ኣለና ግን እንታይ እዩ ኦብስታክል ዝብል ኣሎ እንታይ ኦብስታክል ኣጋጢሙኪ ንዝብል ግን ኣነ ጥራሕ ዘይኮንኩስ ኣብ ካልኦት እውን ዝረአኩ ኤክስፐሪንስ ወሲኸ ክነግረኩም እንተኮይነ ከም ኮሚኒቲ ንሕና ዝጋጮ ነገር እኒሄና ክእረም ኢልና ንሓስቦ ንሓዋሩ እውን ኣብ ከይዲ ክፅቡቕ እዩ ምክንያቱ ኣመራርሓ ናብ ደቅና ናሕለፍናዮ ስለ ዘለና ግን እቲ ዝነበረ ኦብስታክል እንታይ እዩ ፖለቲካን ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ስራሕቲ ሶሻል ይዋቃዕና ብዙሕ ግዜ ናይ ፖለቲካ ቅዋምና ኣብ ዓዲ ናብዚ ሒዝናዮ ንመፅእ እሞ ድሓር ዝተፈላለየ ተሓዛኒ ሕዝ እንታይ ይደባለቐና ይተሓዋወሰና ምስለኩም ምስቲ ናይ ሶሻል ናብራና ፈላሊኻ ንኩሉ ተፈላለየ ስቴጅ ኣለዎ ነቲ ፖለቲካ ናይ ባዕሉ ስቴጅ ኣለዎ ኣብ ደገ ክኾን ይግብኦት ነቲ ኮሚኒቲ ግን ከም ሓደ ቤተሰብ ክንሰርሕ ኣለና ኣብ ዝብል ብጣዕሚ ብብዙሕ ተዋሲእና ተቃሊስናሉ ኢና ሶፋር ዝሓሸ ነገር እናርአና ምኳንና እናገለፅኩ ተበግሶ ይምኸምኡ እዩ ነይሩ ይቐኒየለን
Thank you, Zuriyash. Do any of you guys want to add to that? Just touch on, you guys are leaders in your communities. How did you get involved and how was your experience with that?
Yeah, sure. I can go next. As probably most of you guys here, before the war started, I was not really engaged in the Tigrayan community because I was thinking as Ethiopian and I was not that much engaged with Ethiopian either, but my engagement was not good. But when the war started, it was not a choice for me, but it was a duty to step up and kind of be part of the community and be part of the change that I would like to see and be helpful instead of just sitting down and, you know, be depressed at home. So that is how I started to get engaged by going to protest. I didn't really know a lot of the Belarus in the Bay Area, for example, where I live. But once I started going to protest, I started to get friends. Now I have amazing support group that I was able to get from that. And just like many other relationship or any other kind of things that you create, there was some obstacles. And basically because we're getting to know new people which we didn't know before, we're working with these people intimately and in many ways, and there are going to be conflicts. And those are kind of the obstacles that I can explain. But the more I get to spend more time with my Tagalog brothers and sisters, and the more I get to learn about their individual qualities and individual talents, those obstacles become more easier. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Hidat. Somehow I'd love if you could add on to that.
I would say that prior to the genocide, I was heavily involved in just our church community. So that's where I initially started at a young age, just being in the community and feeling that presence. I always saw the value and the power of when we came together and when we would praise and worship. I always wanted more, so that was kind of my gateway into then becoming a part of our community. So it wasn't necessarily the genocide that helped me get more involved because I already knew these people and, you know, we celebrated together, we mourned together and all the in-betweens. some of the obstacles I could say that I faced were a mix between my own personal insecurities and being like, you know what, I'm not as traditional as I should be. I don't read and write in Tigray. I'm not as fluent, and sometimes I wear facial jewelry, or I might have purple hair at Abuela one night, and so I felt like that kind of excluded me, and I would be like, I'm different, or I don't belong, and then later on, I feel like there was a point where I realized that these things that also made me feel like I wasn't good enough or that I was a little bit different, that my uniqueness is actually what kept me grounded and helped me become more of the community, because there are other people who are like me or who feel that way and they're like, I don't belong, but sometimes you stand in your own way.
I love that. Thank you. Somehow that was perfect. Well said. I think Zuriash wants something to add.
እሺ ሓንቲ ነገር ክውስኽ ዝደለኹ ናብቲ ኣነ ዝገልፆ ፀናሕ ብሶሻል ፖለቲካን ተዋዒዕና ዝብል ኣብ ናይ ውሽጢ ፖለቲካና ማለት እዩ እዚ ቅድም ኢሉ ዝነበረ እዩ ዝዛረብ ዘለኹ ኦብስታክል ኮይኑ ፀኒሑ እዩ ግን ሕዚ ከበየለና እንሄልና ግን ትፀገም ዝመፃ ኣብ ትግራዋይ ዝተባሃለ ብምሉእ ስለ ዝኾነ ኣብ ሓደ ምዕራፍ ከም ዘለና ሓድነታ ዝጠንከረ ኮይኑ ከም ዝተረኣየ ብእውን ክንቅፅል ምኹናና ክንዕወት ምዃንና ከዓ ክንገልፅ ፈቱ ይቐኒ
All right, so as we all know, through our advocacy, we've been trying to break out of our echo chamber and influence the next generation to kind of take the torch as we move on. So I'm wondering, how have you leveraged outside communities to impact your own community building? And what avenues of development have you championed for the next generation of women leaders?
Sure, can go next. When the war started, we start thinking about how we can help, and for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is using my own talents, using my own qualities and abilities, and that's what everybody is doing here, by the way. I am fluent in Spanish, so first thing I thought was our first thing that advocacy we were doing was creating awareness about what's happening in Tigray, the true nature, the genocidal nature of the war. So I used my skill, I do interviews, I write my own articles and kind of create that network with people who are writing things in Spanish. So that's one thing that I used. And the other one is I'm a banquet manager by profession, so in creating events and hosting events is something that also I do. So I kind of collaborate with NGOs that work to help Tigray in kind of organizing events, hosting them, and bring that event kind of it's not about the money, but also advocacy and getting more partnership from people that are outside our community, and also kind of being a model to other events. For example, the first event that we had in the Bay Area was beautiful, and we got a lot of feedback from our community. They wanted to do the same thing. So that's kind of sharing experience to kind of incorporate and bring more people that are outside our communities.
Did you guys want to add to that?
Yes, I would like to add ኣብዚ ኮሚኒቲ ክንዋሳእ እንተለና ሞር ምስ መንእሰይ ወለዶ ኣብ ኮሎራዶ እዩ ዛረብ ዘለኹ ከም ኮሚኒቲ መራሒት መጠን ብዝበዝሕ ኣብ ኮሎራዶ ውሽጢ ናይ መናእሰይና ተሳትፎ እናበርትዕ ዝኸደሉ ድሕሪ 2019 ከዓ ብዝበለፀ ማለት እዩ ኣብኡ ናይ መጀመርያ ልክዕ ከምዞም ቺካጎ ጌርናዮ ዘለና ስለዝተገበረ ኣብኡ ቲፒኤል ተመስሪቱ ካብኡ ከዓ እናታቶም ኢንቮልቭመንት እናበዝሐ ኸይዱ ኣብቲ መረፃ ባዕሉ ፍርቂ ኮይና ማለት እዩ ኮሎራዶ ኣብቲ ግዜ እሱ ዋላ ኣብቲ ኣይትመረፅ እምበር ጓል ተንሽተይቲ ጓልና ምልእተ ብጣዕሚ ካብ ነዊሕ ግዜ ሰሪሓትሉ ዳርጋ ፍርቂ ዕድማ ኣብታ ዘላካ ያንግ ዕድመ እውን ማለት እዩ ንኮሚኒቲ ዘለዋ ዴዲኬሽን ሕሉፍ ነገር እዩ ኣብ ቮት ትደፍአና ኣብ ስራሓውቲ ኩሉ ክንገብሮ ዝግበአና ኣብ ኣሜሪካ ከም ተጋሩ ክልተ እግርና ጠጠው ክንብል بحيث البوليتيكال بخميري إلنا تمنجست يكون محبر السوي يكون بزح زسرعة النجار نيرمو تاي نجبر لنا على زدل activity تاع ناتنا community حاوزوا نسرح حاوز جبر نستوم من أسيد كنا بمحواس أنا يوم بتخيل مثلا كلمة بمبالغ إمكان بمحل بزح سرح نعينا أوزنا حزز الأواناتون نا كونغرس نستوم ستافرز ديو بالتفل على مركوع بزون كونغرس من وي ومن بزح ناي عندنا دمس إنه نكون حزون تورنا تواسعيت زلا تدماتي تونا في خبابي ناس نزخنا ملئته كيزة تركوا أي حلفن كاو حلفنا خا مس زيوم نيتيف أمريكانز يوم بسألماتنا خيرنا ناتو بروجرام بزجم بلوه بحاول خيرنا نسوم لنا يوعدنا إحنا لنا يوعدنا advocacy نقول لمن قدي تتعبنا بخو عين channelنا خدنا تو communityنا نستوم كارود أفرط أو مزرح ولو من قدي سريحنا إنا كبير خطوة يعني.
So I also just want to remind ourselves that as we're talking about our experiences here in the diaspora, it's important for us to tie everything back home because that's what this is all for. So I just want to highlight the struggles of the Tigray women back home, and I'm wondering, what role do women in Tigray have in fighting against the genocidal war, and what gender-specific obstacles are they facing?
Yeah, I mean, the role that women are playing in this fighting this genocidal war is huge. I can't even explain it with words because we know that women have leadership role in many things. They are the core of the community. They are the ones that, the glue that holds everything together. And because our enemies know that, they attack them. They use their body to destroy our community. And that's how we know. But despite everything that happened to them, they also continue to be the most resilient and the most people that are still strong and showing us the way to fight this kind of genocidal war. And we're seeing that in all areas. When I think about our women back home, for example, is they have been victims of sexual violence, that we have seen horrible acts, and they're forced to have children that they're not by their choice. And now they're forced to see their children starve and die. And how can, be on that side and be a leader and be coming as a strong and resilient, for me is something that I cannot honestly explain. But yet we're seeing them being strong and being the leadership, being the leader to show us the way in different ways, in creating foods that are not used to eating, for example, in being leaders in the waterfront and in being leaders in all kinds of areas. So they're still showing us the way, even though they have been the victims of this war on purpose.
Very well said, thank you.
Yeah, I can add up a little bit in here. We see the heroes back home, the victim ኮይነን ዘለዋ ዝገበረኦ ቃልሲ psychologically ድዩ physically ድዩ ከም ሞናሊዛ ሓዚ is a good example ንኽትቃልስ ዝገበረቶ ንኽትድሕን ዝገበረቶ ቃልሲ ኣትሊስት ሂወታ እኒሆ ዋላ እግራ ተቆረፀ ማለት እዩ እቲ ትውሽጠን ዘሎ ሕራነ ኣብ ኩለን ከም ዘሎ ንፈልጥ ኢና ንሳ ሓንቲ መርኣያ እያ ማለት እዩ እና ብተኽኣለ መጠን ኩሉ ኣብዚ ዘለዎ ብዲያስፖራ ድዩ ብደገ ዓዲ ውሽጢ ድዩ ብዙሕ ሽግር እናሕለፈ እምኒ ዓረየ ዝበሃል ናይ ትረት መግለፂ እዩ እዚ ህዝቢ እዚ ብጣዕሚ ተሪር እዩ እሞ ኣብተን ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ዝርአ ከዓ ትዝበለፀ ትዝሓየለ ምዃኑ ብተፈጥሮ እውን ብከይዲ እውን ዘጋጥመን ዘሎ ሽግራት ተዋፅኦሎ ክኸዳ ምኽኣለን ሓደ ዓብዪ መርኣያ እዩ ካሊእ ኣብቲ ሲቪል ራይትስ ዝምልከት ኣብ ናይ ጥራሕ ኣብ ናይ ዓድና ውሽጢ ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ እቶም ከም ዘሎ ብሙሉእ እንትየን ኣብ ፋይቲንግ ዘለዋ ብዝኾነ መንገዲ ሚሊተሪ እውን ዝቃለስ ኣለዋ ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ ኣብ ተራድኦ ድዩ ኣብ መሃብ ድዩ ኣብ ዝተፈላለየ መንገዲ ሕዚ ብዝበልፅ ኣብቲ ቅድሚት ትረኽበን ደቂ ኣንስትዮ እየን እዚ ከዓ ብጣዕሚ ዝሓብነና ዝሐጉሰና ይኸውን እሞ እቲ ኦብስታክል እንታይ እዩ እቲ ናይ ናትና ኣብ ውሽጥና ዘሎ ናይ ምቕባል ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ ብኣክሽን ምርኣይ ሕዚ ኣሕዋትና ደቂ ተባዕትዮ እንታይ ክገብሩ ኣለዎም ኣብ ዝብል እናወሰኽኩ ካሊእ ዝሕሎ ነገር ብዙሕ የለን ጥራሕ ምብርትታዕን ኤሊቬት ምግባርን ነተን ዝቃለሳስ ግቡአን ክብሪ ሂብካ ኣብ ግቡእ ክበፅሓ ኣብዚ ዓዲ ምሉ ባዕልና ነበርናስ ክንዲ ምንታይ ኢና ተቐቢልናዮ እትዮም መወዳትና ማለት እዩ ምቕባል እውን ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ ብክንዲ ምንታይ ክኢና ሓጊዝናየን ልዕል ኢለን ክርከባ ክሰርሓ ብዝበለፀ ክዋስኣ ምክንያቱ ንሪአን ኣለና ኣፈፃፅማ ኣጀማምራ እውን ኣፈፃፅማ እውን ክንዲ ምንታይ ሲሪየስ ምዃንን ንሪአን ስለ ዘለና ካብ ኣሕዋትና ደቂ ተባዕትዮ ንፅበዮ ሞራልን ሓገዝ ኤኒ ብዝኾነ ኮርነር ክሕገዛ ዝኽእላሉ መንገዲ ክግበር ይፈቱ ከመይ
Thank you, Mamhar Zuriyash. So you kind of touched on what we're going to talk about next. So I'll go ahead and move on to the next question, which speaks about how historically women have been at the forefront fighting against, leading civil rights movements, essentially. So I'm wondering what methods can we implement to help close the gender gap that we see there?
So as they stated, historically women have been responsible for a lot. Not only are they the fighters, but they have been providing food in a famine and, rationing it out, as well as mourning. So they're being brave while they have to mourn. But something that I want to keep in mind when we speak of this gender gap is these men are only the men they are today because we raised them. They're our brothers, they're our sons, they're our fathers. So they're a reflection of who we are. And I think that what we haven't done enough of is providing and creating a space.
Everybody wants to have a seat. The next one is called Tigray Community Building Panel. We have Professor Galaudios, Mevrat Michael, and Alula Solomon as our panelists. And our moderator is Danny. Okay. Danny will do, otherwise known as Danny Denver.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and welcome to this very important panel discussion that we're going to have today pertaining to Tigray community building. Most of us are here for community building, so I'm excited for the conversation to have with y'all. I will go over the bios of our panelists so that we can get started with the conversation. And first of all, thank you for agreeing to be part of the panel here today. First up is Alula Solomon. Alula Solomon is the CEO of Tigray Media House. Alula has been involved in media and civil organization work since 2013. He's also actively involved in region politics for Ethiopia and the Horn of Africa, and has been for the past 8 years. Alula resides in Washington, D.C., and I want to take this opportunity to also congratulate Alula on his engagement. I'm sure that you guys all right, next up is Mevrat Michael, and dear older little sister to me. We grew up together, so I'm honored to be in front of you here. Mevrat Michael is a founder of Tigray Professionals Network, TPN, as we collectively call them, and the immediate past co-chair of TPN National, Mebrat is passionate about learning and development and sharing tools with community leaders to help build and develop thriving Tigrayan communities. She is an active member of the Tigray community of Atlanta and resides in Atlanta, Georgia. And she's from Denver, don't forget that. Next up is our beloved leader of our communities for a very long time, Dr. Gladios Araya. Dr. Gladios was first educated at Tigray University, majoring in political science and minoring in sociology, and pursued his undergrad degree in the same field and graduated from Columbia University in 1985. And he further pursued his graduate studies in philosophy and social sciences for his first master's in 1987 and second master's in comparative and international education in 1989. And he finally earned his doctorate in international studies and with concentration in comparative and international education in 1990. So very impressive educational background. Dr. Gladios is also known to have authored several books and 350 scholarly articles. That's very, very impressive. Wow. What few of the most known books have been The Political Economy of Transitions in 1995, Globalizing Africa, Aid, Debt, and Development in 2003. Dr. Gladios is also founder and president of the Institution for Development and Education for Africa, IDEA, founded in 2002. Very well-rounded, a political scientist by profession, but also a historian by convention, as you put it. And welcome, all of you. One last thing that I mentioned here is Professor Gladios donated 104 books for TPN Tigray trip and $2,080 in amount to help send TPN kids or young adults to Tigray to visit. So when we get that chance, we would like to appreciate you for that opportunity. Now that we got that out of the way, we can get started in our conversation today. My first question is going to be for Alula. What are some ways to better facilitate and ensure regular communications across Tigray diasporas using media, in your opinion?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll be more comfortable speaking in Tigrinya. So, as you remember, come to Zikro then, 2017, ይመስለኝ ኣብ ዴንቨር ሚዲያ ከመይ ይመስረት ዝብል ዲስከሽን ካይና ነርና እና ኣብቲ መድረኽ ዳኒ ዝሓተተን ሕቶ ሓንቲ ነይራ ካሊእ ብዛዕባ ፖለቲካ ብዛዕባ ገለ ይሓትት ነይሩ ዳኒ እንታይ ሓቲትኒ እዚ ሚድያ እዚ ንኮሚኒቲ ከመይ ገይሩ ይሰርቦ ክገብር ምስ ኮሚኒቲ ዝህልዎ ርክብ እንታይ ይመስል በዚ ኣጋጣሚ ንዳኒ ተመስግን ኣለኒ He was concerned about this since day one. Media የለና የተጋሩና ክንንቀሳቀስ ከለና ማለት ነው። So ከምትፈልጦ communication as a very important in every aspect of life and now community መጽሐለና it's more important ዝበለጸ ማለት ነው because በይንኻ ትነብሮ ናብራ ይኮነ ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ስራሕ ፈልጦ ነው ሕብረተሰብኻ ተቀራረብ ስለዚ ኣብ ሕብረተሰብ ውሽጥኻ ክትዘራረብ ክትረዳዳ ሓሳብ ክትለዋወጥ ኣለካ and the tool is communication, the tool is media and ኣብ ልዕሊ ብኣካል ብመዓልታዊ ንራኸብ ካብ ወፃኢ ከም ትፈልጥዎ ብፍላይ ሕዚ ዘሎ ዓለም ናይ ቴክኖሎጂ ብርሕቐት እውን ጂኦግራፊ ከይደረተካ ትራኸብ ኢኻ ዝተፈላለዩ መዳያት ማለት እዩ ብዙም ንኣብነት ዋዕላታት ተካይዲኦም ብኮንፈረንስ ኮል ዋዕላታት ተካይዲኦም ቪድዮ ኮንፈረንስ ስካይፕ ካልኦት ሚድያ ከዓ ሜንስትሪም ሚድያ ሓደ መንገዲ እዩ ስለዚ ብክልተ መንገዲ ምስ ኮሚኒቲ ቅርርብ ክህልዎ ሚድያ ኣለዎ ኢለ ዝኣምን ኣብ ህንፀት ኮሚኒቲ እውን ኣስተዋፅኦ ገብር ዘሎ ሓደ ብፍላይ እቲ ሚድያ ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ሚድያ እንድሕር ኮይኑ ከም ቲኤምኤች ዳያስፖራ ዝመስረቶ ናይ ዳያስፖራ ትግራዋይ ሚድያ እዩ ክትፅል እንድሕር ኮይኑ ቀፃልነቱ ክረጋገፅ ዝኽእል ምስቲ ኮሚኒቲ ጥቡቕ ዝኾነ ዝምድና ምስ ዘለዎ እዩ ሓደ ካልኣይ ኣገዳሲ ነጥቢ ኢለ ዝወስዶ ኣብቲ ትካል እቲ ኮሚኒቲ ቦታ ክህልዎ ኣለዎ ብምሕደራዊ ማለት እዩ administrative wise the media if the media is a community based media it has to be run by the community ስለዚህ በዚህን ክልቴን መሰረታዊ ነገራት ጥቡቕ ዝኾነ ዝምድና ክህሉ ኣገዳሲ ዝኣምን ናብቲ ኤምኤች ክመፅእ ከለኹ ስፔሲፊክሊ ኣብ ዝሓለፈ ኣብ ዴንቨር ዝነበረ ኣኼባ ሕድሕድ ኮሚኒቲ ሪፕሬዘንታቲቭ ክህልወን እሞ ካውንስል ክጣየሽ ናይቲ ኤምኤች ኩለን ኮሚኒቲ ዝውከላሉ ብቮት ማለት እዩ ወሲና ቃላት ኢና ነርና ሕዚ ዌር እንዳ ፕሮሰስ ኦፍ ኤስታብሊሽንግ ናይ ኮሚኒቲታት ተወከልቲ ዘለዎ ቤት ምኽሪ which is council ናይቲ ኤምኤች ይጣየሽ ኣሎ ማለት እዩ and that will be the highest body of TMH's administrative structure. ስለዚህ እዚ በዘጋጣሚ ኣብዚ ኮሚኒቲታት ዝተረኸብኩም እዚ ውሰድዎ ገሊኹም መዲብኩም ይሁኩምና ኣሎ ሪፕሬዘንታቲቭ ንኣብነት ቺካጎ ንተስፋይ ይሁኩምና ስለዚ በዘጋጣሚ ቀልጢፍኩም ሪስፖንስ ስለዝገበርኩም የመስግን ዴንቨር ኣይመለሱን ዘለዉ ኣሳይመንት ክወስዳ ንዕኸቡ እዩ ስለዚ መምህር ዙርያ ሽውነ ኣብዚ ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ብጣዕሚ ቅድስቲ ዓባይ ሓፍትና በዚ ኣጋጣሚ ንዴንቨር ዘመራኽቲ ደብዳቤ ሰዲድና ኢና ፎረም እውን በዚ ኣጋጣሚ ነተን ኮሚኒቲታት ትምልሱ ዘለኹም ቲኤምኤች ንዘቕረበልኩም ፃውዒት ናይ ውክልና መልሲ ትህቡ ዘለኹም እዚኣ ናይ ሞትን ሕየትን እያ ክንውከል ኣለና እዚ ቲኤምኤች ሽሙ ሒዙ ትሕዝትኡ ሒዙ ንዝተወገሰሉ ዕላማ ብቐፃልነት ክሰርሕ ድሕር ኮይኑ ክንመርሖን ክነመሓድሮን ኣለና ብምባል እዛ ናይ ሪፕሬዘንቴሽን ጉዳይ ፎረም እውን ሙልጌታ ሕድሪ ነተን ኮሚኒቲታት ኣዘኻኽሩና እዮም ስለዚ ኣብቲ ውክልና ዝብል ኣገዳሲ ዝኾነ ካሊእ እታ ሓንቲ ኢለ ዝገለጽክዋ ናይ ምስ ኮሚኒቲ ብቐፃልነት ሓቢሩ ዝሰርሕ ከምቲ ኤምኤች ዝበለ ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ሚድያ ናይ ኮሚኒቲያዊ ዝኾኑ ስራሕቲ ትሕዝቶታት ክሕልፍ ክኽእል ኣለዎ ንኣብነት ከምዚ እዚ መድረኽ እዚ ኣብዚ ተረኺብና ኣለና ከምቲ ኤምኤች እዚ መድረኽ እዚ ኣብ መላእ ዓለም ዘለዋ ትግራያት ከምቲ ሙሉጌታ ዝብሎ ክበፅሕ ኣለዎ ሓቦዕ ኒሕ ሒዝዎም ንሳቶም እውን ኣብ በብኸባቢኦም ክደግምዎ ኣለዎም እዚ መድረኽ እዚ ስለዚ ሚድያ ከይከድኩም ካብዛ ኣዳራሽ እዚኣ ወሲዱ ከብፅሓ ናብ ሕድሪ ገዛ ኣብ ዴንቨር ከማ ጌርና ነርና መናእሰይ ሽዑ ኣብ ዴንቨር ዝነበሮም መድረኽ ኣብ ኣውስትራልያ ንስራሕ ጉዕዞ ከይደ ከምታብ ዴንቨር ዝገበርኩም ኣብ ቲኤምኤች ከምኣ ከመይ ጌርና ንገብር ኢሉ ሶ ብጣዕሚ ክትሕጎሱን ክትኮርዑን ይግባእ ዝሰራሕኩሞ ስራሕ ኣይ ቲንክ ናይ መጀመርያ ኤቨንት ንሱ እዩ ነይሩ መስለኒ ኣብ ኣውስትራልያ ዘሎ ትግራዋይ ቅዱስ ዝኾነ መንፈሳዊ ቅንዒ ሒዝዎ ኣነ እዚኣ ክደግም ኣለኒ ካብኡ ድዕሪ እኳ ንሙሉጌታ ባይሎ ንኣኸሎም ኢለ እዩ ሂብ ሰዲድለይ ሰዲድ ኣሎም ብዝበለፀ እውን ኢንጌጅ ክገብሮም ይደጊውን ይብሉ ነይሩ ስለዚ እዚ ጋብ እዚ ብሪጅ ኣብ ምግባር ሚድያ ዓብዪ ኣስተዋፅኦ ኣለዎ ካልኣይ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲና ብዙሕ ኢንስፓየር ዝገብር ስቶሪ ዘሎ ብዙሕ ክንመሃረሎ ዝኽእል ወለዶይ ዝብል ናይ እንግሊሽ ፕሮግራም ኣለና ድሌትና ኣብ ዘላ ድሌትና እያ ተዳልዎ ናይ እንግሊሽ ፕሮግራም ኣብኡ ዝቐረቡ ቆልዑ ኣብ ትግራይ ዝፈፀምዎ ይኹን ኣብ ዳያስፖራ ዝሰርሕዎ ስራሕቲ ንካልኦት ኣብነት ኮይኑ ከመር ገይሩ ሶ እዚ ምስቲ ጀነሬሽን እውን ምስቲ ኮሚኒቲታት እቲ ጀነሬሽን ዘለዎ ኮሚኒቲታት ስትሮንግ ዝኾነ ኣታችመንት ክህልወና ገይሩ ስለዚ ብከምዚ መዳይ ኢና ክንከዶ ከየንውሖ ዳኒ ሰዓት ስለ ዝዕቅቦ ኣየሕልፈንን ሕፅር ሕፅር ኣቢልካ ተምለስ እምበር ብዙሕ ብዝርዝር መኸድና እንከዲና እውን ንቐፃለ ካሊእ እዚ ናይ መወዳእታ ይኮነ እዚ መድረኽ እዚ ክህልወና ናይ መድረኻት ፎረም እውን ብቐፃሊ ሚድያ ዝጥምት ነገራት እንዳሉ ኢንቫይት ከም ዝገብረና ተስፋ ይገብር ስለዚ ብኸምኡ ክንሰርሕ ኢና እሱ እየ ከም ዝደሊ እና ኣብ ሚድያ እውን ኮሚኒቲታትና እስክንሃንፀ ንኽእል ኢና እቲ ኣክቹዋል ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ስራሕ ኣሎ ሓቂ ኣብ መሬት ንሱስ ኣብቲ ሚድያ ክነምፅኦ ኣለና ካልኦት ከዓ ናይተን ዝተሃነፃ ፅቡቅ ውፅኢት ዘምፅኣ ኣብነት ተኸቲሉ ከምኡ ዓይነት ኮሚኒቲ ኣለካ ዶ ኣብ ከባቢኻ ትግራዋይ ዝነብረሉ ከተማ እዎ ኣሎ ጆይን ግበር የለን መስርት ዝብል ሜሴጅ እውን ኣብ ምሕላፍ እቶም ኮሚኒቲታት ዝሰርሖ ነገር እውን በቲ ሚድያ ክሓልፍ ከሎ ኣይ ቲንክ ህንፀት ኮሚኒቲታት ኣብ በቦ ከባቢኡ ክስስን ዝበለፀ ስራሕቲ ክስራሕ ይኽእል እዩ ኣብ ኣትላንታ ትዝክሩ እዮም ዝተሰርሐ ምስ ቲፒኤን ማለት እዩ ስልጠና ዝሃብኩም ካፍታ ኤቨንት ንሳ ከባቢ 5 ፕሮግራም ወፅና ከምቲ የመች ነዚኦም ያን ጀነሬሽን ዝምልከቱ ነቶም ዓበይቱ ሶ ከምቲ የመች ንሕና ዊ ኣር ሃፒ ንትግራዋይ ሓንጎሉ ክሃነፅ ዝኽእል ነገር ልኩምና ብናይ ትግራዋይ ርእሲ ካሊእ ናይ ትግራዋይ ርእሲ ክህነፅ ኮሚኒቲታት ብሚድያ ብሉ ሰሪሖም ስለዚ ኣይ ቲንክ እዚ ክቅፅል ኢና ኣለና ያለለይ
አሁን ሀገር ጽቡቅ ጌርካ ገለጽካያት ሚድያ ከነገሩ ናይ ኮሚኒቲ ናብ ጥቕሚ ንኮሚኒቲ ክውዕል ከም ዝኽእል አሁን ሃለው ድማ ከመይ እዩ ሚድያ ከክወደና ዝኽእል እውን ከም ርእይቶ እንታይ ይመስል እስከ ብሽተ ሰለ
ፅቡቅ ኣገዳሲነት እያ ብመጠን እንጥቀመሉ ዘለና ሚድያ ብኡ መጠን ከዓ ሚድያታት ኣብ ልዕሊ ህዝብና ዘብፅሖ ነገር ትፈልጥዎ ትግራይ ጀኖሳይድ ኣብ ኦቨርናይት ኣይተወለደ ጀኖሳይድ ስቴጅስ ኣለዎ እዚ ሕዚ በፂሕና ዘለና ደረጃ ንክበፅሕ መጀመርያ ካራክተራይዝ ክገብሩና ከለዉ ሲምበላይዝ ክገብሩና ከለዉ ክላሲፋይ ክገብሩና ከለዉ ደው ዘብል ሚድያ ይነበረ ትግራዋይ ብክልተ እዩ ኣብ ሚድያ ተጎዲኡ ሓደ ኣክሰስ ኣይነበረና ሚድያ ክዛረበሉ ዝኽእል ክንደይ ምሁር ትግራዋይ ኣሎ ክንደይ ዓቅሚ ዘለዎ ክንደይ ኢንስፓየር ዝገብር ስቶሪ ዘለዎ ግን ሚድያ ሶ እዚ ክስበር ኣለዎ እዩ ሓደ ክስታይ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ ንህዝበይ ከምህር ደልየ ፍልጠተይ ከካፍል ደልየ ግን ሰኣን ሚድያ ይፅገም ኣለኹ ዝብል ክህሉ የብሉ ስለዚ እዚኣ ሓንቲ ዝነበረትና ክፍተት ማለት እዩ ዝጎድአትና ሰኣን ቅድም ኣቢልና ጅማርና ማለት እዩ ከም ትፈልጥዎ ከዓ ኔሬቲቭ ቢልድ ዝግበር ሓደ መንገዲ ብሚድያ ተጠቒምካ እዩ ዶን ሃብ ሚድያ ዶን ሃብ ኣክሰስ ቱ ዘ ሚድያ ዶን ሃብ ኔሬቲቭ የብልካ ዋላ እንዳሃለውካስ ምንም ኣይፍለጥን ማለት እዩ ስለዚ እሳ ብኣ ተጎዲና ኣኻለይቲ ከን ዝነበራ ሚድያታት they were very and they are ሕዝውን ሆስታይል ኤገንስት ተጋሩ ሕዚ ብልጫ ተወሲድና ጥራሕ ኣይኮነን ቀዲሞምና ምኻዶ ይኹጥቁጡና እዮም ነይሮም ብመዓልታ እቲ ቴሌቭዥናት ስክሪን ክሳብ ዝፀልኦ ትግራዋይ ማለት እዩ ዳሕራይ ተነብ ዓዲ ዘለዋ እውን ሒዞምዎን ናትና ዝመስላና ዝነበራ ማለት ወሲዶሞ እምበር ትግራዋይ ደዳ ፋና ዋልታ ዝበሃል ቴሌቭዥን ክፀሊ ይግብኦ ነይሩ ፀሊእዎን ኣብ ኣዲስ ኣበባ ኣብ ሕድሕድ ገዛ ብቤተሰብ ደረጃ ሕጊ ወፁ ፋና ዋልታ ኢቲቪ ገለ ከይተኸፍቱ ዝብል ማለት እዩ ቆልዑ ከይተረፉ ተነገሩ ፍኮርስ ቲኤምኤች ክፈቱ ይበሃል ነይሩ ስለዚ ብጣዕሚ ኢና ተጎዲና ትግራይ ጀኖሳይድ ናይ ሚድያ ካምፔን ውፅኢት እዩ ፍኮርስ ካልኦት ፕሮፓጋንዳታት ነይሮም እዮም ብኣርት ብቤተክርስትያን ብዝተፈላለየ ማሕበራዊ መንገዲ ትግራዋይ ክፅላእ ዝገብር ክንደይ ፕሮፓጋንዳታት ነይሩ ካብ ማሕበራዊ ሂወት ጀምሮ ብሰሓቅም ብቐልድን ዝሓለፍኩምዎ ባለ ግዜዎች ከምዚ ወርቂ ዝገበርኩም ከምዚ ተመችይኩም ጥዒምኩም ሃፍቲምኩም ኣወጋገን ተሪልኩም ቅርሺ ትቕበሉ ኣለኹም ገለገለ ዝብል ነይሩ ገሊኡ ቀልዲ ኢልካ ትሓልፎ ከምዚ ኣብ ዝማዕበለ ዓዲ እኮ ኣሎ ቃላለ ዲኻ ገለ ግን ኣይቐጥሩኻነ የጥቆኻን ናትና ግን ንመቕተሊና ይውዕሉ ንመጥፊና ይውዕሉ ካብኡ ከዓ ካብ ማሕበራዊ ሓሊፉ ብኣርት ዝተገለፀ ነይሩ ክንደይ ግዜ ብኣርት ትግራዋይ ሎምኡ ድማ ብግልፂ ኣምፅኦም ወሪኦም የመን ኣናግሪኝ በአማርኛ የመን ትግርኛ ዝብል ኣምፅኦም ኣሎ ሎክ ስለዚ ከምኡ ነይሩ ኣብ ሚድያ ዝበለፀ ሰሪሖም 27 ዓመት ሚድያ ኣብ ብልጫ ተወሲድና ቀጥቂጥና ብመልሓስ ተቐጥቂጥና ዳሕራይ ከዓ ብገጀራን ብርዛዕ መፅኦም ማለት እዩ እዚ ተዓወዲና ካልኣይ ኮሚኒቲ ቢልዲንግ ስለ ዝኾነ ዘርእስቲ ኮሚኒቲታትና ንምጉዳኦም ከውዕልዎ ይኽእሉ እዮም እዙን ክንጥንቀቐሉ ኣለና ደሞ ኣነ ዓብዪ እዚኣ في بوليتيكا اوف كورس لا يوعد مدرك نزعل له او بلينا او كوميونيتياتنا ان نحنا مترطرات تطر نايشو مطلع عينت كامبين كغو خلو وسبنا زي مخبار نجمر نرسنا نسالا ننعع كومي خو مالتي سو تاينا هندبر زلنا لا وعنا ميديا معنا لا وعنا ميديا كاتات زلو بلكات كرما نكرر إنا نسمعه كاو لا وعنا ميديا غيرنا سواتنا زخبروا من قد نفتح تزكوين تن أنصار تجربة زخدا أو بوليتيكا بارتي أو قلت راح دوزو لا خير مسلم أو كوميونيتي كمسا أو شات خميدي غيره كمسا تجربة زبالكو الشباب زي تبعه كله بزلون أو نارجو ترى الشباب زي تبعه نالوا ديلومو مقولوا لو نارجو كاب تجربة مالتي سلزي زقولو سباتنا كتبوا عقله تعالوا خون أو كوميونيتي كماركو يسكوفو مالتي مهران بينهم حسابه ندهجو استاذ كيمن سمنتان رأوا على الميديا أنا خيرنا كاو كنت عينت نيجاتيف زبونة هوستايل زبونة ميديا هاريحنا بغزالي رأوا على الميديا تزعيان تي نحنا خلنا قرنا زبون نجر الصوم يلومنا خلنا نقول تايدا كنا برلنا أنا رأوا على الميديا تزارينا حسابنا قليلنا نكاتر على تجمعهم أنا وعلى حقهم كنت كابري خبر كاب تزانات خوابيرك قصيرك حق خويرك اعتذار تقول لك اعتذار لك او حلف كان تسوي قربته اي تنكفون سلازم ما عينك بهذه كنا مع الله ناخذ يدلي عني
Thank you. Next up, I want to ask Mara, you worked in helping develop and improve communities, efficiencies, and so forth. What are some areas that you continuously see or in need of improvement within Tigray communities and in your views?
Well, first I'll say I think there's always an opportunity for improvement. We're not perfect, so that means we can always learn. We can always learn to do more, we can always learn to be better. There's always a need for improvement. Let me tell y'all, we hosted for the first time ever a leadership training in December of last year in Atlanta. We had 35 people that came from Boston, Denver, Atlanta, Columbus, DC, Maryland, that all came to Atlanta for training, for the leadership training. And we brought in some speakers. We talked about how can we develop professionally and personally. We did an assessment to talk about our strengths and our weaknesses. And one of the things we did is let's talk about our strengths and weaknesses in the Tigray community. Right, so there's some things you think about strengths. And I brought my notes from what we did. We had poster boards on the wall. We broke out into little groups. Danny was there. If you were in the leadership training, raise your hand. I know we have some people. Yep. All these folks in the room, they attended the leadership training in Atlanta in December. It was the first time we've ever done anything like that. And if you ask them how was the training, all of them will say, that's the first time I've ever done anything like that in my life. And the reason why we push that at TPN is because, again, there's always an opportunity for improvement. If we don't work on ourselves, how can we help other people? If we're not our best selves personally and professionally, how are we supposed to help our community members? So that's what TPN is about. We have to develop ourselves. If we're going to help Tigray, if we're going to help our families, if we're going to help anybody, it starts with us. So when we did our breakout of strengths and weaknesses, some of the things you probably already know. So what some of our strengths? We're compassionate. We have positive intention. We are hard workers. We know we're very hard workers. We're resilient. We're persevering. We have perseverance rather. We're visionary. We can be diverse. We're interdependent in the sense that, we depend on one another, but we also are independent and very strong in ourselves. We're creative. We have common value, and we have serious pride, right? Those are our strengths. We have some major pride. But when we talked about our weaknesses, we said procrastination. We like to wait to the last minute to get anything done. Punctuality. We don't like to be timely, right? We know that, as evidenced by today's schedule. We don't like to be timely. That's one of our weaknesses. Lack of commitment. Again, we have good intention, but what do we say? Yeah, I got you. I'll be there. And we don't show up. We don't commit. Even when we say we're going to do it, we don't show up. So that's the weakness as well. Emotional management. We talked about it with the mental health panel, we talked about the Maui, we keep everything inside. We don't know how to like communicate our feelings, we don't know how to just manage our emotions, that's a weakness as well. We said ego. You know, we got a lot of ego in our community. Communicating effectively. So we don't communicate effectively. We don't trust each other. And another thing that we said was our strength is also our weakness, is our pride. It can also be a weakness. So what does this mean? We said these are things we need to improve on. And if we improve on all of these weaknesses, what does that mean? Like, is that gonna help us build a stronger community? Absolutely. If we talk about procrastination, and we work on improving that weakness of procrastination, that means we can learn to be more productive. If we work on punctuality, that means we can actually work on being timely, respective of people's times. How do we handle lack of commitment? Well, if we're honest with ourselves and we say we can't do something, don't say yes. I got it, just say no. And I think as community members, we have to accept that. If somebody tells you no, it's no. Don't push them, right? Because we have to be honest with ourselves, because now we feel pressure. That's why we have lack of commitment. We don't want to tell anybody no, but when we are counting on you to show up, it's hard because you told us yes and you're not coming, right? So how can we improve that? Let's be honest with ourselves. If we are not having the ability to commit, then that's okay, say no, right? This is how we can improve. Emotional management, that's a big one. We have to work as a community on healing ourselves. We have a lot, I mean, especially what's going on the past 2 years, whatever we're bringing, like Mahara was sharing, we bring that trauma with us, it's sitting in our bodies, and we don't know how to manage that emotion. So if we continue to lack our healing and make that as a priority to do better, then we'll continue to be weak in our community development. And then trusting each other, communicating effectively. We have to learn. We have to learn how to communicate with each other. We have to learn how to trust each other, and we cannot let our pride get in the way. One big thing that we said during the leadership training about our weakness, we don't know how to say sorry. If we did something wrong, we will never admit it. Why? And, you know, maybe it's even better, like, you know what, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I made you feel that way. I didn't realize that was, I'm sorry, my bad. And then we move on. But instead we hold it in, we get mad at each other, and then we pick sides. You have to be mad at her, and you have to be mad at her because I'm mad at her. What? I don't know why we do that, but you know, I love our people, we are very stubborn. So how can we work through that pride and being able to admit when we're wrong? There's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong. Matter of fact, it's actually healthy. That's part of emotional management. If we can admit, like, you know what, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to say that. I'm sorry you felt that way. Guess what? If I said that to Danny and Danny harmed me and I told him, like, Danny, that wasn't cool, I didn't appreciate that. He didn't even know he harmed me, but by me telling him that, he could say, you know what, you're right, my bad. Sorry for that. And we're good, instead of holding that inside. So we talked about all of these things are weaknesses, but how can we turn them into positives? And if we address those and do that, at first we have to be aware of these weaknesses. Let's acknowledge them, and then let's think about how we can improve. Because if we do that, then what's the result? Stronger community, healthy communities. We know how to communicate. We know how to show up for each other. We actually become more unified. We become more powerful. And I think ultimately we'll feel peace. We'll peace within ourselves, peace within our communities, our minds. If we can work on these weaknesses, that's how we can improve. So I know the question was, you know, are there needs that we can improve on? Absolutely. I think we can improve on all of these things. And what's the common denominator? It starts with us. We all have to take our own responsibility and our own growth and development so that we can help one another. And I know sometimes that's hard to do because it's easier to point the finger at other people, but if we point the finger back at ourselves, that's the focus that we need to make. I want to be the best me. If I'm the best me, I can help my brother Lula, I can help Dr. G, I can help Danny, and we all flourish. So that is what I'm always pushing with TPN, with my friends, with my families, like, let's not put the blame on anybody else, let's take responsibility and ownership, and let's do our best. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of improvement. Like I said, we're always evolving. But if we take that ownership and responsibility, I think ultimately that's how we become a stronger community.
There's always an opportunity to improve, but to also just kind of reflect on things and see it from a personal side, and then taking that approach and saying, how could I put myself in a position to help the community is very essential. And then collectively, if we all do that, then we come back and build a strong community. But I want to tie it back to TPN and the kind of work that TPN has done so far, you and the leadership. What are some robust systems that we can have to helping students? And as you know, now, more than ever, a lot of people are kind of confused about identities, where they belong, who they are, and what belief systems that they have, as well as just professionally, how you grow, what kind of schooling you get, if you do decide to go to school, all of that. There's so much that young adults now are facing. What are some robust ways or systems that we can have that would actually help us in becoming and building a better community?
I think everything always comes down to two things: people and resources. So it always comes down to us as people and the resources that we can either provide or gain. So if we're thinking about the youth, we need people who are willing to devote their time and expertise and also gain those resources to help our young people. That's what it comes down to. So if we think about the Tigray Professionals Network, we're trying to have a chapter in every single city. All the programming that we do is from the youngest community member to the oldest community member. Those are our target demographics. We try to do programming for the community. But if we don't know ourselves what resources we can provide, then let's go pull in other resources. And Maui talked about it, how let's pull in these networks. Let's pull in these other organizations. Even if it's outside of the community, that's fine. Let's bring them in so that we can learn those tools and resources. Not to say that we don't have them in our community. I feel like we have a lot of resources, but we don't know what everybody's doing because we don't speak up. I can help with this, or I can provide this. We talked about in the tech field. So many people want to be in technology. Can we help fill that gap and provide those resources for the young people, for even our elders? You're never too old to stop learning. I know we always talk about youth, but it's for everybody in the community. Our oldest community members can benefit as well. So I think when it comes down to programming and building like a robust community system, it starts with all of us. If we can even just donate an hour of our time, that's something you're giving. And if we can pull in and say, hey, I heard somebody had this conversation, they have a business, maybe we can bring them in to speak to the community. That's how you share the resources. So we need the people and we need the resources. That's the way we can help support our community, from the youngest community member to the oldest community member. And I think if we just simplify it, not make it too complicated, and understand.
We've been involved in helping with Identity Committee and teaching our heritage, our culture, and history, and just kind of going back and retracing our footsteps, our ancestors' footsteps. And one of the main challenges that most young adults had, growing up, most of us, self-included, was just learning our culture and our heritage in a more engaging way, in a way that we can actually put ourselves in the shoes of our forefathers and kind of understand the path they led into to us. How do we do that? How do we make learning about ourselves in a more engaging way? How can we achieve that, in your opinion?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Danny, for actually really moderating this important panel. And I am in good company, by the way. Lula was not just talking about media, he was an activist. I mean, you know him very well. And I'm very proud of this aggressively honest. That's what I'm telling you, right? Now what I'm going to do, by the way, before I start, I have to tell you that I have the privilege and honor to speak to my own people, Tigray. Because I have been teaching for the last 30 years now. Who do I teach? Americans, Caribbeans, West Africans, few Ethiopians, rarely Tigrayans. But now
called I'm really happy that I came over. Automotive was very well. I had a problem, but I said I'm determined to go to Chicago. This time around, I'm not going to stay home. And I enjoyed it really the last 2 days. I met so many wonderful people, so many great people, so many wise Tigrayans actually really. But remember, I have never encountered a full Tigrayan. Most Tigrayans, 99% are wise. However, this is not coincidence. It is actually a legacy of thousands of years of civilization that was founded in Tigray. So I'm going to take you back a little bit into history. What I'm going to do is we're going to track back thousands of years into history. What Danny posed a question to me actually has to do with history and culture. People who don't know their history and culture are like the great Marcus Garvey said once. Yeah, people with no history are like a tree without roots. You see, you have to have roots. So I've been trying my best, all of you know, in many, many programs, in many, many, are you here, Shana? Yes, yes. You can be in the image, actually, really. You can start with any one of them. So we had not only great civilization in Tigray, the so-called Ethiopian civilization is Tigray civilization, by the way. And the legacy of that actually created so many creative and wise people in Tigray. And then I'm going to introduce you to one, before I start, well, I'd like to introduce you to one great philosopher, Egyptian, by the way, ancient Egypt, 4,000 years ago. His name is Tahotep. He says once, the fool rises early in the morning to agitate himself, and the wise rises himself early in the morning to establish himself. The people of Tigray rise in the morning to establish themselves wherever they go, wherever they are. They're creative people, hardworking people, wise people. But that's not coincidence again. It's a legacy of thousands of years of culture. So we have to begin to understand, first, our history. Second, our culture. What does culture mean? Many people, even my students, by the way, every time I pose this question to them, they come with this idea of the narrow conception of culture, which is customs, traditions, way of life. The food that we eat today, by the way, is part of our culture in general, and all that, exactly whatever that is. But in the broader sense, culture includes knowledge, skill, technology. And we had it all in ancient Aksum. Brilliant civilization we had, brilliant. So we have, look, that massive monument, Aksum, so you can see that over there, right, all of you? That massive monument was excavated from a place called Gobadra. Gobadra is like 7 kilometers from Aksum, or 4 miles from Aksum. They actually carved it out from the mountainside and dragged it by a pulley thing, a carriage thing that was pulled by elephants. And then they put them on what we call today the Stella Park, or whatever they call it. That monument weighs 350,000 pounds.
Can you imagine? It's massive. It is like 23, 24, the two of them, the twin, actually 23 and 24 meters high. The one that's fallen is 33 meters high, 110 foot. It weighs 520 tons. If any one of you now calculate without going to Google or something, how many pounds is 520 tons? Anyone? Okay. I was going to send you a book for free. 520 tons, how many pounds? Okay, that's not a problem. That's okay. 520 tons is 1.04 million pounds. You have to be proud of your ancestors. Great people. Great people, great people. We have wonderful, wonderful ancestors, really. And then that civilization was not a material civilization only. I mean, massive monuments and what have you, what have you. Okay? But you can move on, Sanai. Hey. Sanai is not here. Sanai, can you check it up, please? Okay. Anyway, it's not just a material culture, monuments and what have you, but the Aksumite civilization was rich in astronomy. I met one young lady last time. I think her father is around. Her name is Abi. She told me she wants to be an astronomer. Wonderful. Those great astronomers, you know what they did in Aksum? They were gazing at the stars, at the movement of the moon, the sun. And then they were studying the seasonal variations. And they came up with a calendar. How did they do it? The lunar movement is 28 to 30 days. There were 12 points of the zodiac. Now they're going to join the 12 and the 30 days. If you multiply 12 times 30, how much is it? Come on. How much is it? 360. But those wonderful ancestors of ours say 360 is not enough. So they came up with additional 5 days. Probably. 365. This is the same calendar we use now, universally. The Europeans took it from us. We did not take them from them. Legacy of Aksum and ancient Egypt, of course. They were great astronomers. They were great teachers. They were great mathematicians. They were incredible people, philosophers in Aksum. At one point, when the first king, Zoskalis, came 100 Common Era, he expanded Aksum. And Aksum began trading and everything, and they've gone to Advocacy and beyond to the Red Sea. Now Aksum is not just the city and the district. The whole kingdom was Aksum. Then another great king came after Zoskalis. His name is Endubis. Endubis said, we've been trading so much, we're not going to do barter all the time. Barter means changing in income, right? You're not going to carry stuff all the time. So he said, come, how intelligent he is. Look at Endubis. He was the first guy to create money. And Aksum was the only civilization in Africa that had its own money. So what you're going to do is you're going to carry money in your pocket and you go buy stuff. And then there was a problem with that, and with money. You're not going to get in return change. It's just one money, circulates around, right? So after Endubis came Aphilas, around 300 common era. And Afilas say, okay, this is how we're going to solve the problem of money. Money is good. It's a medium of exchange now, right? But we're going to solve the problem because instead of having circulating one money, we're going to have denominations of money, which means you're going to have a dollar, 50 cents, 25 cents, 10 cents, 5 cents, a penny. So if I go and buy with a dollar, and what I'm buying 50 cents, I'm going to get, in exchange, I'm going to get 50 cents, right? So I'm going to have money. The guy with whom I traded is going to have money as well. On top of that, Afilas came up with the idea of having 3 kinds of money: silver, copper, and gold. The silver and copper were for domestic trade. The gold was for international trade. By this time, Aksum has expanded all the way. They've been trading with Arabia, India, Sri Lanka, and China. This is a great civilization that you guys have to really understand, study, and appreciate what your ancestors have done. Okay? So, at one point, archaeologists were digging in southern India, a province called Kerala. They found gold money of Aksum, which says Afilas. And I was very proud of that guy. And I named my firstborn Afilas. Now I'm connecting myself with my sisters. But my son was bragging all the way. And he said, I was king of Aksum. But the fact that he said that is reconnecting himself. You see? That's one way to reconnect. That's why we want to go back to that great civilization we had on everything. And medicine was advanced in Aksum, Ethiopia, when it was covered. And at one point, Aksum expanded, and then I met one Khalid today. I told him briefly why he should be proud of his name. Because after Afilas comes Ezana. Ezana is another great guy. Ezana is the first Christian king. Ezana expanded Aksum and Kush and Nubia. So Kush and Nubia, northern Sudan, became part of Aksum. Ezana has 2 brothers, Sezana and Adafa. Sezana, most people know about Sezana, but people don't know about Adafa. Okay? These 2 brothers of Ezana were the generals that led the expedition to Nubia. So during Ezana, Aksum became much, much bigger. Now Aksum means what? Present-day Tigray and Eritrea. Most of the southern part of what we call today Ethiopia, up to Somalia, Zeeland. This is all Aksum now. After Ezana, I'm going to skip all. I cannot tell you the whole, because we're going to be here the whole night.
Well, I think we want to save that for
okay, hold on. Now I'm going to brief it now. So, who comes after that? Another great guy, Khalid. Khalid expanded it to Yemen. Yemen became part of Aksum too. So they've created so many things. Okay, look, the currency, the money, they created actually all of them. Aksum was the only one that had its own money, I told you. Okay? And then they created also, how do you communicate? Not just verbally, but you have to communicate by writing too. By writing, they created alphabets. Greece. It's unique, actually. The only one in Africa now. Okay? So, in its very broad sense, this is history. In its very broad sense, we have the culture as well. But unless you know it, you're not going to be a full-fledged Tigrayan. So at one point, Sinai asked me in one program we had with this Tigray identity, which is part of the Tigray Communities Forum. How do I speak? How do I learn Tigrinya? And I said to him, it's so easy. You don't need formal education for that. Sit with your mom in the kitchen and ask her, what is this? She's going to say, kara, write it down. What is this? Chow, salt, write it down. When the vocabulary expands, you speak Tigrinya. When you speak Tigrinya, you are a Tigrayan. Suddenly you're a Tigrayan, I don't deny that. However, to become a full-fledged Tigrayan, you have to speak Tigrinya. Why? Language is the first identity of any nationality. You got to know it. By the way, it's good to be bilingual too. Those of you who were born and brought up here, you speak English, right? If you add Tigrinya, it's a plus. So I am actually doing something towards that, and effectively we're going to do it with the help of the TPN and others, and ultimately all of you are going to speak Tigrinya, which is really fantastic. I have to end it here because we're going to be here the whole night.
Thank you, Dr. Gadi. In lieu of time, I'm going to ask one final question for everybody, and hopefully you can give us an answer that you see fit. This has to do with what's going on back home. It's one chapter for us to build a community here, and then it's also part of our responsibility to rebuild Tigray. How does a community, a successful community, facilitate that in helping rebuild Tigray? And I'll start with you, Dr. Gadi.
Actually, this was effectively answered by Maverick and others that were at the panel we had in the morning. You remember? There are so many wonderful things. Actually, really, we're going to combine all of them. Those gentlemen who were talking about credit line and investment and all those things are important. Those women who were talking about women empowering women, those are important as well. By the way, if you're not familiar, I've written a book about 15, 16 years ago. It's called That Tigrinya book actually is good for you guys if you want to learn Tigrinya. There is history in there too. There is culture in there too. There is Kwangwana, how Tigrinya evolved from Greece in there too. If you combine all of this, you're going to have a very strong community in the diaspora, Tigrayan community. Okay? Because knowledge is important. Knowledge is power. Period. If you're not knowledgeable, you have no direction, you don't even know where you're going. You can have sentimental attachment with Tigray, but you got to know. We had a plan, by the way, where's our congregator not here? We had a plan before the COVID to send some 70 Tigrayan young diaspora to Tigray, so that they can be exposed to the Tigrayan culture. Okay? But it did not work. And then war came again, devastating war. But at one point it's going to happen. Sooner or later it's going to happen. This is obvious. Mickey from Oregon right here has been doing a lot of things. And others are doing the same thing. So if we pull together and put everybody, can you imagine this, if we add up the skills of all of you into one, it's going to be incredible. We're going to be like our ancestors. We're going to actually perform miracles, right? It's very important, but unity is important above all. We have to act like one family, okay? This is very important. It could be differences, no problem. Difference of ideas, that's fine. We have to be tolerant to many, many ideas. Even people who oppose me, I tolerate them. I don't take it personal. That's how you build a society, actually. We need diverse perspectives too. You cannot have just one idea. It's boring. That there be many ideas. That they should flourish. Ideas should flourish. However, the common denominator is now what? The Tigrayan interests of our people in Tigray, who are suffering a lot. That's why all of us have been going, demonstrating, and doing all these things, okay? So, we can build a strong community here by unifying ourselves, by pulling together, by adding up our skills and knowledge and everything.
Thank you, Dr. Panelist. I guess we can go to you, Norman. Do you want me to go over that question? This is, how do you see us transitioning from, one, having successful communities here locally in our respective areas, but also rebuilding Tigray? How does that look to you, and how can we successfully achieve it?
I think it looks collaborative, because if we are going to, as we say, build Tigray, the diaspora, what can the diaspora do for Tigray? It's both ways. We have our own ideas of how we operate because we live here. Back home, our elders, our community members, they have their ideas of how to operate, so that's how they do it there. So it has to be a collaboration. I don't think it's a right or wrong thing. We have to figure out how we work together to help ourselves. When we think about Tigray community building, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of personal responsibility, right? It's ourselves. So the way I see it is, if we're gonna help ourselves, let's do what we need to do to actually help ourselves. That's what it comes down to.
بمعنى درشنا خاطر كده على تقولي يا ميرو تفضل ميديا وين مع أبي بوضع زوج سيريزي أب ونفس لنا يوم تاخ ميجمعنا كمية تنتظر قوعة تمارس أنا عادة كتلنا الماني عندنا سيزي أبتوس شو وصل له سجن قوتي ونفس نورو ما وين نزلت سنزل عادة خير تقرأ يذكر نقرأ ميجمعنا إحنا عاوز عادة نبرنامجس تمارسنا عندنا ون بأسبوع مثلا الحكزون كنا أرينا أن تزورنا تتكلم.
Thank you, Dani. Document Tigray rebuilding process. Committee Professor Galaudius, common haftay mabrat zwalato. Kam had kam arsaha yizjumber kam arsa hinsa. Tai yawi zalo. تمهارين توكا تمرتي أبي كم صحنني نقادا إن حكم كان نقدي كم يكعبوا لنا كم يكفت ملنا بعدين حد تقرأي حفتي حد تقرأي كفتم تقول تقرأي حفتنا لذي السوق كابو سدرابي قال بزح نقرأ على كاري أو نتوقف للناس نقرأ كله نقبر الناس لذي نسأت ويدان نسأت تقرأي كاب عرسة نسأت يجمر زياها أب دياسبورا لا زلنا مدرحنا كوميونيتي سلطان أو كارينا بزي كوينات زي أب تقرأ جلو ترحي كنا تقولي أب زلو سنام سكولات وصحنا الله سزي كاو من العالم أب قلنا خازلو حوكا أب قلنا خازلنا حفتها سدرابت ولدي كبعد كافتا متحتة تعتقول ماله سزي كاو أو كوميونيتي صور رزق بوم نقرأ institutions build المدوار ما تقرأي rebuilding صراحة institutions build المدوار أقداسي أو عدي زول تقرأي زهان سنت كالات الله which is نحن نتعرف ويننا راح أقاتهم بحقك كنا هنصل زي الخير هاو فهذه سنة الله عارزي كنا هنصل الخير كأ أو ريسورس زي ما لو فلاي استقرأي معنا وتتعهد كنا هنصل الخير institutions كنا يبغى عليك جمرنا ميديا فزين حاجة ميديا لنا دياسبورا ترى من جيتا قال حزون كدنا أب سفر على خبري تقرأي مسرات تقرأي زين تقرأي زين نحن في عند نحن أنكرة أبدأ تترانزيشن تريبيولي very smoothly نالات كم تي 3 عام من نحن ماليش كنا ولو زلنا على توم زدفونا 30 ዓመት ይገጽበት ማለት እዩ ኣብ ሓፂር እዋን ክንብሎ ንኽእል ኢና ብዝበለፀ ፅሬት ብዝፀበቐ ጌርና ክናንፆ ንኽእል ኢና ብዙሕ ብዘሳተፈ ከዓ ውሱን ትካል ኮንስ ንብዙሕ ትግራዋይ ክሳተፍ ዝኽእል ትካላት ብምህናፅ ማለት እዩ ስለዚ እዚ ትካላት ናይ ምህናፅ ስራሕ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲታትና እውን ይሃሉ ኖርዝ ብሪጅ ሓደ ትካል ቲፒኤን ሓደ ትካል ኮሚኒቲታት ባዕሉ ትካላት ኣብዚ ከም ኮሚኒቲ ንሰርሖም ኣብ ስደት ኮይንካ ስርሑ ናይ ስደት እዮም ክኾን ሓቂ ግን ስደት ይኹን ዓዲ ይኹን ዘይሓፅሮ ዘይሓፅሮ ተግባራት ኣሎ ንዓዲ ክውሰዱ ዝግብኦ እዚ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲ ቆልዑ ተኾትኩቶም ይዓብይ ሓቂ እዚ ባህሊ እዚ ኣብ ዓዲ እውን ክስፋሕፋሕ ክኽእል ኣሎ ስለዚ በዚ መዳይ እዚ እቲ ናይ ትግራይ ዳግመ ህንፀት ኣብ ዓዲ ውሽጢ ዝህነፅ ትካላት ኣብ ዓዲ ኣብዚ ዝህነፅ ከዓ ኣብዚ ብምህናፅ ክስራሕ ይኽእል እዩ ካብዚ ብተወሳኺ ኣብ ዝሓለፈ ዓመትን ፈረቓን ሓደ ዘማዕበልናዮ ውህሉል ተመክሮ ኣሎ ትግራይ ጀኖሳይድ ዓለም ክፈልጦ ምግባር ትግራይ ጀኖሳይድ ዓለም ክፈልጦ ጌርና ብሽሙ እንድሕር ተፀዊዑ ብሰንኪ ትግራይ ጀኖሳይድ ዝጠፍአና ነገር ንኽምርክሓስ ቀሊል እዩ ዝኸውን ኣብ ዓለምስ ክስታይ ፈጢርና ኣለና ማለት እዩ ሎክ ዶክተር ቴድሮስ ኣድሓኖም ዝገብሮ ዘሎ ጀስት ሂማኒቴርያን ዝኾነ ነገር ጥራሕ እዩ ናብ ፖለቲካ ከይኣቶ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ይጠፍእ ኣሎ ኢሉ ስቑና ክንርኢ የብልና ኣብ ካልእ ዓዲ ዝተፈጠረ ጎንፂ ኳስ ተጠቒሙስ ናይ ትግራይ ጠመተ ይረክብ ዘሎ ኢሉ ገሊፅዎ ፅባሕ ንግሆ ነተን ሕዚ ኣብ ካልእ ዓዲ ጉድኣት ዘብፅሐን ዓድታት ክሃንፁ ከለዉ ከም ኣኽናዓቶም ኢናባው ትግራይ እውን ክትሃንፁ ኣሎ ከምታ ጠመተይ ትህዋን ዘለኹም ትግራይ ንብሎም ዘለና ናይ ፅባሕ ኣብ ትግራይ ቢልዲንግ ዝህልወና ሰልፊ ሕድሕድ ናይ ፋይናንሻል ኢንስቲቱሽንስ ሶርስ ክኾና ዝኽእላ ናይ ገንዘብ ናይ ፈንድ ካብ ባዕልና ዘሎ ናይ ባዕልና ትካላት ዓንቶ ዝበልኩ ኮሚኒቲ ከም ተጋሩ ሕድሕድና እናሃንፆ ንግድና ትካላትና ንብረትና ስኾም ዘሎ ኮይኑ ብተወሳኺ ከዓ እቲ ማሕበረሰብ ዓለም ኣፍልጦ ሃቦ ኢና ንደፍኦ ዘለና ኣፍልጦ ዝሃብካ ኢኻ ኮነ በልቲ ዝዓነወ ምትካል ኣብ ዳግም ኣብ ምህናፅ ኣብ ንገብሮ ፃዕርካ ኮነና ዩክሬን ኮነ ካሊእ ተመሊሶም ናብ ምህናፅ ክኣትዉ ክረባሩ ከምቲ ሕዚ ጠመተ ረኪቦም ዘሎ ከምኡ ከህብዎም እዮም ስለዚ ንሕና እውን ኣብ ኣፀጊዕ ኢሎም ትግራይ ፋይናንስ ትካል ጌርካ ኩሕኩሕ እንድሕር ኮይንካ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲ ግራንት ክተምፅእ ኣለካ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲ ተለማመዱ ኣብ ኮሚኒቲ ግራንት ከመይ ከም ዝመፅእ ኮሚኒቲ ዝህቦ ረብሓ ከባቢኻ ዘሎ መንግስቲ ኣረዲእኻ ስትሮንግ ዝኾነ ኮሚኒቲ ወፂኻ ኣብ ከባቢኻ ገንዘብ ክተምፅእ እንድሕር ዘይትኽእልካ ፕሮፖዛል ክተዳሉ ዘይትኽእል እንድሕር ኮይንካ ፅባሕ ንግሆ ኣልመዳ ኣዲስ ፋርማሲቲካል ተመሊስካ ንምህናፅ ገንዘብ ክተምፅእ ይትኽእል ስለዚ ካብዚ ይጅምር ኣብዚ ንጀምሮ ህንፀት ትግራይ ክብሉ ይደሊ ኣሜን
እዚ ግዜ ስለ ዝሓፀረና ናብ ሕቶ ካብ ኣድየንስ ክንወስድ ኣይንኽእልን ግን ኣብዚ እውን ዝዛዘብ ኣብዚ እውን ናይ ህዝቢ ኳየት ኮይንኩም ሪስፔክትፉል ኮይንኩም ምሳና ስለ ዝሰርሕኩም ብጣዕሚ ኣመስግን For the panelists, thank you very much for the insightful explanation that you gave to the questions. We're fortunate to have you, all three of you, in your respective fields to be part of WATNA and also just to contribute in the way that you have. So I'm honored that you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. We have certificates. Thank you so much for participating. We will be starting our next panel. It's our last one for the day. We thank you all for your patience. If I can have Councilman Gurmai and Panelist and Maazagide please come to the stage, and our moderator Samal Hadku. We'll be starting in less than 5 minutes. Give our certificates. Okay. Professor Galaudios, we'd like to give you a certificate. Michael? And he's got the Alula Solomon? Can I have my last panelist come to the stage? Has anyone seen Councilman Goodman? Okay.
Thank you so much for your patience. We are very excited for this panel today, and we've had amazing speakers this whole day, and I'm super excited for this next one. So I'll go ahead and start by introducing the panelists. And I'll start with Councilman Girmay Zafai. So Girmay is a King County Council member, an elected position representing 2.4 million people in King County, Washington. After graduating from Franklin High School in South Seattle, Girmay received degrees from Stanford University and UPenn Law School, and worked in the Obama White House. His experiences growing up in public housing and going to public schools inspired him to pursue anti-poverty work through the Congressional Hunger Center, and also to found Rising Leaders, Inc., a nonprofit that equips underserved middle school students with mentors and life skills training. Since taking office, Girmay has offered bold solutions to problems that need immediate regional leadership. He has worked to build and maintain affordable housing for communities experiencing displacement, invested more in youth opportunities, expanded public transit in neighborhoods that have the highest need, reformed criminal legal systems, and made the political process more inclusive across communities and generations. So thank you, Girmay, for being with us. All right, and next we have Maaza Gide, and Maaza is a dynamic human rights advocate and international relations expert who collaborates with global institutions and intergovernmental organizations such as the European Union, United Nations, and the Human Rights Watch, as well as grassroots organizations to fight state-sanctioned violence against civilians and advocate for women globally. She's a prolific community organizer who has raised millions online and offline for disaster relief and humanitarian aid provision to crisis-stricken communities. She presents regularly on leading media and at conferences as keynote and panelist to advocate for human rights and equity. Ma'aza is an international relations researcher, human rights advocate, and a community organizer at Omna Tigray, a nonpartisan global organization that advocates for Tigrayans and other marginalized people. She's also the co-founder of the first independent women's rights movement in Tigray, Ethiopia. Before the start of the ongoing war, Ma'aza, alongside her colleagues at the Independent Women's Rights Movement in Tigray, was successful in providing humanitarian and economic assistance to vulnerable women who were highly impacted by the COVID pandemic. Ma'aza completed her undergrad degree in South Korea, where she earned a BA in International Studies on a merit-based scholarship and graduated with honors. She received her MA in International Relations in the US and graduated with distinction. Thank you, Ma'aza, for being here. And lastly, we have Fana Melez. So Fana is a current congressional intern and student at the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State University, where she's pursuing a BS in public policy. Through a series of interactions with the state of Georgia's mental health system as a patient advocate, Fana bore witness to existing disparities in treatment and access to care across marginalized groups. This inspired a desire to pursue a career in public office to support the drafting of health policies and legislation that promote equitable access to quality health care. In the most recent legislative session in Georgia, Fana served as a legislative intern for State Senator Kim Jackson and was able to aid in drafting SR 800, a Senate resolution calling for unfettered humanitarian access to Tigray, in addition to organizing a press conference at the state legislature. And also, let me add, Fana put in a lot of work for that, just on her own, nonstop, working late nights for that bill, so, for the resolution. And as she continues on her journey, Fana plans to utilize her growing legislative background to continue advocating for the people of Tigray and promoting civic education and engagement within Tigrayan communities across the diaspora. Okay, so we have some amazing panelists with us, as you see. So I'll go ahead and start with our first question, and each of you guys can answer it. So we have a little bit about your background. Considering that each of you are engaged politically, what inspired the initial steps of your journey to becoming civically engaged citizens?
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to speak to members of our community because personally I believe change only comes from within and when you start from the grassroots. So any opportunity to talk with members of our community, to learn from each other's experience is a great pleasure for me. So I want to say thank you so much for inviting me here today. In order to make sure everyone understands what I'm trying to say, I would speak both in Tigrinya and English, and I hope that's okay for everyone. To answer the first question, I think ever since I was young, primarily due to the influence my mom had on me growing up, I always knew that I have a role to play in making this world a better place for all of us. But I also recognize the fact that it's tremendously impossible to drive change if you don't start at home and small. So ever since I was in my early years of teenager, I was very active and involved in community services in my neighborhood and my school. And most of it comes from the fact that I came from a very humble beginning, but I had a mom that installed in me this idea of being able to drive change no matter what your background is. So knowing that fact, I have always been active in politics and rights advocacy. Prior to the conflict being waged against our people, I was actively working on empowering women in Tigray politically and economically. Because if we want to see a prosperous Tigray, for that matter, a prosperous world, we have to educate our women, because they are half of the total population globally. So you can just بحاجة كم زي كأل حدا نحرسك أكاد ترحيز كم خدوني كأل. So زي فالإسلاز نوركو, I was actively working on ensuring that the Tigrayan women have political and economic liberty. So to that effect, my friends and I in Tigray, we co-founded the very first independent feminist group in Tigray called Yukono. Through Yukono, we were trying to create an environment that treats men and women equally so that they can utilize their potential to the best of their ability and eventually be able to create a better Tigray. But while I was doing that, I was also actively engaging in humanitarian efforts to respond to the crisis Tigray was going under, be it the COVID pandemic or the locust swarm. So I have always been active, but I think everything I do comes from the notion, knowing that I have a role to play to make this world a better place, and also to see the kind of world I want to see. كل شعب لو تخمد نحن لقينا أول لقينا يكوننا نبزو نوعتنا كده كنجات نينا يسل زامن ولا قليل كزيخونا بعاقمنا قنقور زقب أن سرحنا مقوال بأمنتنا من راحي لإلي جميلة وانتي. Thank you.
Well, I want to first start by saying thank you to all of the organizers of the Wa'ala conference. And just like Ma'aza said, these opportunities to come together and learn from each other are extremely powerful and such a blessing. And thank you, Samhal, for the introductions. As far as what inspired my initial steps, I would definitely say it also begins at home. I was fortunate to grow up in a family where my voice was valued as a woman and where my parents cared about what I had to say. And that very much translated into the classroom, where I was a confident speaker and I recognized that everyone has something to offer. So in high school, I remember co-founding the first women's political club at my high school. We did a lot of work to break the stigma around menstruation, and also did a lot of advocacy with regards to criminal justice. But I would say the first time that I ever considered going into public office happened in college. So a loved one of mine was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and navigating the state of Georgia's mental health system was extremely difficult, and it was extremely overwhelming. And if you know anything about an illness of psychosis, it's very serious, and individuals who live with serious mental illnesses are extremely vulnerable, and many of them don't have advocates. And even when they have loved ones who want to advocate on their behalf, it can be extremely difficult to know how to start, where to go for help. And so in my time navigating the mental health system, I began to see how much legislation and policies impact an individual's ability to receive access to care. And not just any kind of care, quality care, sustainable care, community-based care. And that's when I realized that I didn't want any other families to suffer, especially families who come from marginalized backgrounds, who are less likely to know English as a first language, and to have networks, and to have access to health insurance. So I would say for myself, it was definitely a very trauma-informed decision, but one that translated into a very beautiful thing, because it allowed me to see how we all truly are interconnected, and our suffering can lead to so much building with others.
I want to thank all the organizers of the event too. Can people raise your hand if you helped organize this event? Let's give them some love, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Yes, everybody who put the event together, everybody who made the food, everybody who's been moving chairs. We appreciate you all. Thank you for bringing us all together. It really does make a big difference. Thank you. What inspired me to get into politics? Honestly, similar answer to Maaza, my mom. You know, seeing how she was displaced within Ethiopia for a long time, and then displaced out of Ethiopia into Sudan as a refugee. And then when we came to the US, it's supposed to be the land of opportunity, a place where if you work hard enough, you can advance and you can take care of your kids and you can pass on wealth to your kids. But we all know that's not how it happens for most of our communities. My mom got one job, one job wasn't enough to pay for rent and food and taking care of your kids. Then she got a second job, then she got a third job, and that still wasn't enough. And it would be one thing if you worked jobs like this. She's a nursing assistant. It would be one thing if you did this kind of work and over time you climb up the economic ladder and then over time you can retire in dignity. But that's not what happened. My mom worked so much that she ended up blowing out both of her knees and now she's disabled and she can't work. So the other part of it is that story that I just told is not just the story of my family. For my friends here who are from Seattle, we know that that's the story of thousands of people around Seattle where people with low-wage jobs are working harder and harder, and every year they're getting less and less out of it because the cost of living is going up so much. So for me, politics is a way of creating a better system so that people like my mom, people that I meet all the time around Seattle and King County can thrive. You know, one job should be enough. If you work one job, you can afford the rent in your house and you can provide a safe place for your kids to live and go to school. So that's the vision and that's why I got involved.
Thank you guys. It really shows how our personal lives can definitely develop a lot of our professional experiences. So going off of that, so considering that governments have an obligation globally to serve and protect citizens and meet basic needs, what do you all feel is the obligation of citizens and more specifically the members of the Tigrayan diaspora?
So I'll go first on this one. So I think our obligation is to protect one another and make sure that we all can live a good life together. And I'm not somebody who thinks everybody needs to run for office. I do think it's not great that people tell me I'm the only Tigrayan who's elected in the United States. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, that's not good. We probably need more.
Civically engaged citizen. A lot of us will vote in the presidential elections. We get that sticker, we post it on Facebook, and we feel like we did our job. But the reality is, that's a pretty low bar. It's not enough to simply vote and then never engage ever again. It's so important that we understand who we're voting for and why, that we know the causes that we're standing for, that we know the individuals and groups that we're defending. We know the vulnerable groups, right? That we know the policies being implemented. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that voting is a right, yes, but it was a right that was fought for. And I think specifically in this country, I think it gets very complicated with identity politics. Yes, we are Tagalog, but we're also Black people in the United States. And we didn't just waltz in here and get to vote. People fought for that. They were bloodied for that. And I think when we understand what was sacrificed, right? And when we understand why so much was put on the line for our right to vote, then we understand the power in it. And I think it's really understanding the basis of democracy, right? It's understanding that the power truly is in the hands of the people only if they're aware of the power that they hold. And so it's not enough for you to vote. You have to engage with your elected officials, know who they are, speak with them, reach out to them. One of the beautiful things that came out of the press conference in Atlanta was that it inspired a lot of the adults in our community to get to know their state officials, their local officials. I remember being at the community center a week after, and a lot of moms were coming up to me and they were saying, I didn't even know there was a difference between a congressional senator and a state senator. One mom told me, I can't wait to buy Senator Jackson Azuria and invite her to our community. People were excited to vote locally, and that made me realize, aha, they're getting it now. They realize that the power is in their hands when they come together. And so I would say that as citizens, we have an obligation to understand the power of our votes and to understand the power of our voices collectively as well.
Yes, I definitely agree. And also these conferences that we have and TPN and everything are a great start for us to learn how to get involved in our local governments and things like that. I think one of the good things with TPN is we always make sure that things are accessible. So having, I think we did like a translation in Tigrinya on the voting process before we had elections. So just making sure we're making the effort to making sure these resources are accessible so then we can make the change within our communities. So thanks for highlighting that. Our next question is, when it comes to civic engagement, what do you feel is the role of students? And how do you encourage those in high school and college to utilize their privilege, and why is it important? What kind of advice do you have for the younger generation?
I'll start. I think this is a very important question because talking about this would help us understand the level of involvement students have had previously in Ethiopia and the state building process, especially during the Sudan movement era, and at the same time, the kind of involvement students across the world have today in amplifying the plight of the Tigrayan people. It also would give us an opportunity to talk about things we should continue to do. From a personal experience, this war began when I was doing my master's degree. I was in the middle of school, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the mental stability to focus on my education. It was easier to give up than to continue. But I was always reminded by the fact that I am able to do the little things I'm doing today because someone has invested in my education previously. If I wasn't educated enough, if I didn't know the little things I know, I wouldn't have been able to help my people in any way and also save myself in the process. My biggest advice is for students that are in college and high school, you have to use your platforms, you have to use the privileges that are accessible to you to amplify the plight of our people, but it shouldn't be at the expense of your studies. It shouldn't be at the expense of your future. Because, I mean, even from a self-actualizing interest, if you don't go to school today, if you don't focus on your education, while dedicating your whole time for Tigray, while dedicating for advocacy, tomorrow you wouldn't be the same person that you were today. Or at least you wouldn't have harnessed new knowledge, new information that would enable you to help Tigray sustainably. So your work is not going to be sustainable if you don't continue to develop other person. So it's very, very important that we focus on education and empowering ourselves in a way that would help us to position ourselves better than we are today. Because لو عند كل ساعتنا نتقرأ أو فينا أو تمرت زلوا قلعت تمرتهم نحرفوا كسيجيرهم ناقا نحرنا حدش فلتاتي اليوم financial independence هنا اليوم لازم نتقرأ تقعتني أيام كونوا نتمحور سوي زلنا وتقعتني أيام كونوا بغض سألنا نتقرأ نحجز عن حردلنا مجمرتان وعسنا نحجز لنا مجمرتان وعنا عود زخاني هو كل مرحلة لنا السنة مقوار أو تمرتي بتعمهم قبل زلنا. I understand not everyone needs to go to college. There are so many talented زخانو سوات بخالي جيرهم يوتهم successful زقورو. Again, at least we need to have the basics. زبال فلتات كل الناس اللي زلوا أو تمرتي زلوا قلعت كاوز قبهم من العلي pressure can go لهم زلنا أي مثلاً. أو college it's okay. معناته at least adapt يوم نوعلكم resist قوري كل يوم زي ما تأكيد. تم أكالي تحزوا لدرجة مرتزوا للغلو كن مجمرتا نوعلتهم تبقوا أسقانا وتزيد كم توينا كنا كلهم زلنا. I want to give an example of how members of our community that are in college are using the privilege that is available to them to put Tigray on the map. 2 weeks ago I was in Buffalo to attend a panel discussion that was organized by Tigrayan brothers that go to that school. His name is Alula. And he organized his entire community. He talked to the college, he talked to his professors, he made sure they understood what was happening back home, and he used his privilege to create a platform for us to advocate. These are the kind of things we need to do, because it doesn't only give us a platform to talk about what's happening, but it also gives us an opportunity to connect with professionals, with academicians, that can be friends of Tigray in the long run, not only today. So in our approach, whether we're in high school or in university, we have to be forward-looking. We shouldn't be tactical, we should rather be strategic in our approach. So if you're tactical, what you do is you put everything on hold and you focus on Tigray. So you're not going to attend your classes, you're not going to study as much as you should. That is you being tactical. For the time being, you might feel like you're doing something productive, but you really are not, because you're putting your future at risk. And you putting your future at risk is also putting Tigray's future at risk. So نوعد كنا نقول حالينا بزح جزين التمركي قالت زهامنا يو نتجرى حالينا ون we have to put more time to our school and education. So I want to encourage people that are in high school and college to make their education a priority, because look at us here. All of us, we have gained some kind of diploma or some kind of degree. That's why we're being able to do the work we do. So take it from us that you have to put yourself first and develop professionally. And after that, there will be a very long time for you to do a lot of good for Tigray.
Maaza said everything I was going to say in 2 languages while wearing heels, so I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you, Maaza. I think one of the good things about TPN, I'm always talking about TPN because I love TPN a lot, is that what a lot of people tell me, people who are maybe 40 and older, it's like, I wish I had this when I was younger. So I think TPN and the forum in general creates a good space for everyone to network and get those opportunities starting from a young age, especially in Atlanta. We start with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and we just make sure that they have the opportunity to explore what kind of subjects they want to get into, any fields, any type of schools and different trades. So I think just providing the opportunity from a young age through these organizations like TPN is a really important thing. So next, I'm going to ask each one of you a sort of personalized question. Gurmai, we'll start with you. Considering that you are currently in public office, how does constituent engagement affect the decisions that you make?
Constituent engagement is everything. And so, how many of you are familiar with the saying, where there's a will, there's a way? All of you, right? It's almost a cliche, but it is the truest statement that you can have in politics. If there is a political will for something, there is a way for it to happen. The only thing standing in the way of things happening is the political will. If everybody in this country stood up and said, we want this thing to happen, I bet you it would happen by tomorrow, no matter how impossible you think it is. They say that, Medicare for all, health insurance for everybody is too expensive and we can't do it. If everybody stood up and said we wanted it, it would happen tomorrow. And that's the case for everything. And so when we're talking about constituent engagement, that is my constituents in my district and around the world making their voice heard about a particular cause. That is the thing that drives change. Now, there's some strategy to that, right? A few things that I would advise. Number one, when you talk to your elected officials, have a specific ask. What specifically are you asking for? I've been in a lot of rooms where people share the problem statement. They share what's going on, they share heartbreaking stories, but they don't have a specific ask for the elected officials. You have to come with a specific ask. What are you asking them to do? Number two, make sure you're talking to the right level of government for the thing that you're asking for. If you're asking about international policy, you probably want to make sure that ultimately your strategy is leading toward the federal government, federal representatives. So have the specific ask, know the specific level of government and what jurisdiction they have over. And finally, when you have the thing that you want and you know what level of government that you need to direct it to, have a strategy around that. How do you get these particular elected officials to make the decision that you're asking them to make? Because 9 times out of 10, they're not just going to do the right thing. They're going to do the thing that, people who they listen to are doing. They're going to do the thing that, is very popular in their district. They're going to do the thing that's going to get them elected. They're going to do the thing that's going to make them money. They're going to do the thing that the influencers around them are telling them to do. So you can form a strategy based on the thing you want, based on the level of government that you're talking about, and you form that strategy, and you can make sure that the thing that you want happens.
Thank you, Gurmai. Fana, so what have your biggest takeaways been from your time in the Georgia State Legislature and navigating the press conference and the backlash that you faced?
Yeah, so I think I would start by highlighting something that Maaza mentioned earlier. It's really important that you make use of the spaces that you're in. And my policy courses definitely played a role in the press conference happening. So in many of my policy courses, I've been extremely vocal about what's been happening in Tigray. And the beauty of these courses are that a lot of the students there also are passionate about issues affecting marginalized groups. And there was this one particular day early this year, I think it was the first week of January, returning back, and I was updating my classmates about how dire the situation in Tigray had gotten. And one of my classmates felt extremely compelled to do something. So on his own time, he reached out to the elected official that he worked for and saw if she would be willing to draft a resolution as on the state level. Form genuine relationships, take an interest in the stories of those around you. That's where humanity is fostered. That's where compassion is fostered. And my last takeaway is going to be highlighting the backlash. As you know, if you don't know, the district that State Senator Kim Jackson presides over is heavily populated with Ethiopians, Eritreans, East Africans. And that includes Ethiopians from parts of Ethiopia that are not Tigray. And so when they saw the press conference, there was a lot of backlash, a lot of attacking, a lot of all that stuff. And so as an elected official, State Senator Kim Jackson has an obligation to listen to her constituents. She has an obligation to simply hear them. And something that I realized was that I was starting to see how the lack of civic education in our community was backfiring on us. Because a lot of our people didn't understand how politics works, or simply that resolution it's not congressional, right? It's not on a federal level, it's simply to spread awareness. A lot of our people began to panic. And they thought that Senator Kim Jackson was a U.S. senator, that she had power and leverage over S3199, and that she was no longer standing with Tigray, when in reality she was just doing her job. She was listening to her constituents saying, I'm sorry that it affected you in this way. She never once took back anything she said for Tigray, but our people reacted out of emotion and got very scared. And something I want to encourage us to do is to be mindful of the way that we portray ourselves and the relationships that we build with our elected officials. Yes, today, right now, in some ways we have to be tactful, but we also need to be strategic and think long-term for Tigray. Tigray is going to need healthy relationships with our U.S. officials long down the road, and we won't get there if we attack every time we hear something that hurts our feelings. And of course, in this context, it is deeply understood that we are in a very raw, sensitive place. It's so difficult, yes, to see an elected official stand with you so clearly and then see them at the community center of people who represent a country that is inflicting the harm on you. But I want to encourage our people to really hold each other accountable before you post something on social media. Check with yourself to make sure that what you're posting is accurate and true, and think to yourself, is this going to better serve our people in Tigray, or is it going to harm them? Or is it just going to do nothing, really, at the end of the day? So those are my takeaways.
Thank you, Fana. And Maaza, your involvement, as we highlighted earlier, in advocacy began prior to the genocidal war taking place in Tigray, and it was rooted in addressing gender inequality in Tigray. How have you navigated current advocacy, knowing that your previous work has been used to justify the usage of weaponized SGBV in Tigray?
It has been quite a challenging journey because I have seen people in organizations I looked up to for a very long time using my previous advocacy to justify the weaponized work that young women and girls in Tigray have had to endure. Personally, it hurts a lot to see people that you consider to be your role models turning into a nightmare. But I wasn't surprised because كقتلوا انتحر كدافروا كقتلوا انتحر من زي مثلا تزقوروا وزلوا ساحل مشفان ستلاقوا عينات مخناتات تتقاموا بزح أيدين جدا. But I and I also don't want to dwell into, talking about how they use my work, but I want to clarify two distinctions that people usually tend to miss while talking about gender-based violence and weaponized gender-based violence. These are two distinctly different things. Women get violated everywhere, be it here in the US, be it in the Western Hemisphere or in Africa. In the developed and both in the underdeveloped countries, women and girls get violated every day. Gender-based violence manifests itself in so many different ways. It starts from coming up and to address come together all the way physically abuse. So the fact that myself and other feminists in Tigray, both men and women, came together and co-founded Yuhono is a reflection of the level of understanding that we had as a community. That as a community, we knew Tigrayan women deserve better. We knew there is more to what we were saying, which is why we all came together, not only to fight against gender-based violence that we were seeing in our day-to-day life, but also to foster a healthy relationship, to bring gender parity in Tigray so that we can collectively grow together. What we're seeing today is gender-based violence that is being used as a war tactic. So this is completely different. Now you see women and girls in Tigray being violated, not only because they're women, but because of their ethnic identity. So this is completely different because this is systemic. This has a political goal or objective. So whenever you guys are confronted with, it could be one of my previous tweets or it could be one of my previous interviews talking about gender-based violence in Tigray, don't shy away from defending it because weaponized gender-based violence ማለት ንሓደ ህዝቢ ንክተጥፍኡ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ስለ ዝኾነ ጥራሕ ዘይኮነስ ከም ሰብ ክጠፍኣ ስለ ዘለዉ ከም ተጋሩ ከም መሳርሒ እዮም ዝጥቀሙ ዘለዉ In today's Tigray, gender-based violence is being used not only to terrorize the woman body, but also to terrorize the whole Tigray community and to extinct nahana existence malatiu. But also, the fact that we had Yuhono, the fact that people like me were bold enough and courageous enough to talk about it reflects very highly on our community. قلت أنا سيد خد صرفة ولا أنت تعرفك مسألكي كتحلي كتقالس لكن أولك زي كم نيرة أحواتكم أنا أولك زي عوين نيرة I wouldn't have had the courage to speak at all. So and this is not just me. We have so many members within the Yuhono movement. So as I said earlier, the fact that we had a movement to fight against gender-based, violence in Tigray speaks very highly of the community. We can talk about other parts of Ne'alam. For example, here in the US, you have the Me Too movement, you have the Time's Up, you have so many feminist movements that aspire to bring gender parity and to better life for women. It's not because the United States is the worst country for women to be globally. We know so many other countries where they have very bad track record of women's rights, but you hardly see anyone speaking against the violence women go to in that area. And that's primarily because there are social, cultural, and economic as well as political factors that are hindering people from speaking up. So the same thing applies in Ethiopia too. At Tigray, ማሕበረሰብና ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ካብዝን ዝለዓለ ይግብአን እዩ ኢሉ ይኣምን ስለ ዝነበረ ኣንሕና ወፂና ኣብ መዓልታዊ ሂወትና ዘጋጥሙ ዝነበሩ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ዘጋጥምዎን መሰለን መሰረት ዝገበረ ወፃዓታት ክቕረፍ ኣለዎ ኢሉ ይኣምን ማሕበረሰብ ስለ ዘለና ኢና ንሕና ወፂና ክንዛረብ ክኢልና ኣብ ዓፋር ክትሪኡ ትኽእሉ ኢኹም ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ኩለን ይኽንሸባ እየን ይግረዛ እየን ገና ቆልዑት እናሃለያ ግን ከምዚ ዓይነት ድሑር ዝኾነ ባህሊ ንኽጠፍእ ዝንቀሳቐስ ዝኾነ ውዳዊ ኮነ ኢንዲቪዥዋላት የለዋን ኣብኡ ምክንያቱ ገና እቲ ማሕበረሰብ ኣብቲ ናይ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ መሰል ዘለዎ መላኻኽታ ዝዓበየ ስለ ዘይኮነ እዩ ኣብ ዓረብ ዓድታት You can hardly find women's rights organizations or advocacy groups that work on improving life for women in the Arab countries. It's not necessarily because women have it easier there. It's because there is no conducive environment for that type of advocacy. But in Tigray, we had that. And that's too much credit to our community. So, ناتي تويت كونا ناتي زران نمسو تحزز قبر زلو gender-based violence justify كجورهم كورخلو ከምኡ ምዝራብና ይኮነን ሓደ ከምኡ ኢልና ክንዛረብ ንኽኣልና ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ክንደይ ዝኣክል ኢምፓወርድ ዝኾና ከም ዝኾና ምርኣይ ከም ዝኾነ ጠቒስኩም ቻሌንጅ ክትገብርዎም ይግባእ ምክንያቱ ክልቲኦም this are completely two different things as I said earlier ትሕዚ ንሪኦ ዘለና ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ዝውፅዓ ዝቕተላ ዝድፈራ ዘለዋ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ስለ ዝኾና ጥራሕ ኣይኮነን ተጋሩ ስለ ዝኾና ናይ ጦርነት መሳርሒ ገይሮም እዮም ዝጥቀምሉ ዘለዉ gender based violence سئل بقلبي لكن صوتها مسرز زجور متقعدي أما اللي على الميوزك بس تقرأ كأني عدم أكاد سلسخانات أو تقرأ يقول لك إنه يسوي صوتا مثلا كتقعد قلائية قالوا لا تبي تمتقع نسوي جاز ولا زعم من محاورة سو كنيرنا نعو ونيو when we started Yukon first in 2019 I believe everyone joined hands. I remember the advocacy that we laid online. Everyone joined. كمهور سكع قشي كم حجي سكع حارس تبولي يتساعدوا. Even virtually ولا. Everyone was so excited to talk about gender equality, to talk about issues that knock each and everyone's door. So we have to understand. We have to take great amount of pride knowing that we have a society and a community that recognizes there is so much more that can be done to bring about gender parity, which is why they encouraged us to do the work we did prior to the conflict. But as I said earlier, it was so shocking even to hear and to see my previous advocacy being used by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission to justify the weaponized rape. After report them out when they did the joint investigation by the UN Human Rights Commission as well as the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, they used تنهنا protests governor تنهنا governor online activism. They tried to hide and to justify the weaponized rape and assaults that they have been committing. But fortunately, for experts that work within the issues that are pertaining to gender, they do understand the difference between a weaponized gender-based violence and a normal gender-based violence. So, again, I want you to take great amount of pride knowing that you came from a community and a society that encouraged people like me to speak about gender-based violence prior to the conflict.
Thank you so much, Ma'aza. I think it's really important to make that distinction. And for the sake of time, we'll have one more question. It's a really loaded question, but we'll try to keep it brief for each one of you guys. What is your vision for the future of the Tigrayan diaspora in the U.S. with regards to U.S. and Tigrayan politics?
My vision for our family back home is to be happy, healthy, safe, thriving. My vision for our community here in the U.S. is to be happy, healthy, safe, and thriving. And I do think our political engagement is a bridge to get there because right now we're not there. We're being harmed in a lot of ways. And I actually started an initiative in Washington State to train people who want to run for office. We meet once a month, we gather, and I share with them, how did I run for office? What documents did I file? How did I hire a political consultant? Which doors did we knock on? All the nitty-gritty details about how to run for office. So if there's anybody in here who is interested in running for office and shaping policies so that our communities can be happy, healthy, safe, and thriving, always feel free to talk to me.
I'm going to build on that a bit more. When I think about the future, let's say the next 20 plus years, I envision a diaspora here of Tagalog that are established in the American political space. I cannot wait to see more Gurmais in office, more Ma'azas in office, hopefully in Tigray, an independent Tigray, more Panas too. And not only that, I can't wait to see our communities more organized, politically speaking. What we're seeing now is just the beginning. And I think this is extremely beautiful because what allows an opportunity for us to come together and build the little Tigray here. Because truthfully, like we said earlier, there's not much we're going to be able to offer our people back home if we're not established and organized here. And whenever I think about this vision, I think about my sister Zuhair. She was someone who understood the beauty and power of community organizing. She is someone who understood the beauty of working on a grassroots level and investing on people in an individual level, from the ground up. We're not going to get to the top until the seed is planted, and Zuhair understood that. And so I just want to say that looking forward, I hope that we can begin to address these issues politically speaking. Our communities here in the diaspora, they are plagued with issues. We have issues pertaining to mental health, addiction, lack of access to education or familial support. And when we're better able to address these issues, I think we'll be much more equipped to support, God willing, a free and independent Tigray in years to come. So that's what I'm looking for.
My vision is literally similar to what Brother Rumaya and Fana said. Just to add a bit more, my vision is to see a strong Tigray community across the world, so that we would be taken as a force to be reckoned with by politicians and policymakers, that we would be taken as an interest group that they have to listen to if they are to make it in their political career. And to make that happen, it's very important that we all come together through different community organizations, including WALA, that encourages younger people to take position. That this is a forum that understands the power that lays within the younger generation. So I hope everybody across the US and also across the world would get an opportunity to learn more about WALA and to implement the strategies that you guys have been using so far to give us incredibly brilliant leaders such as everyone you see here, including Mabrat, Aksum, Aziza, and so many others. To do this, we have to first, as a community, we need to recognize the fact that while we walk on the shoulders of our forefathers, while we walk on the shoulders of the older generation, we have to give power, we have to give space for the younger generation to lead us through the way. And once we do that, I am hopeful and confident that we will see a better Tigray, that we will see the light at the end of the tunnel and see, like what Girl might say, Salam Jallo wa Rahwa Jallo wa Ad. We all need to work together. We have unity of purpose. Our purpose is, like Girl might say, Salam Jallo wa Rahwa Jallo wa Ad. Common and Edward, we all have to come together and work together, understanding and Mahalena. So I hope we'll continue to do the job that we have been doing, and also we'll be open to criticisms and to feedback so that we continue to develop as members of community, as leaders and as individuals. Also important to foster leadership, inclusive leadership. We have religious diversity, we have age diversity, diversity. Everything we do here needs to reflect what Tigray looks like on the ground, and we have to be intentional with the places we hold and how we hold them. So that's my vision for Tigray and the diaspora here.
Thank you so much, Mohaza. Thank you. One final round of applause for our panelists. And also, thank you all so much for being present and being patient with us. And we have a great night ahead.
Okay, we have certificates. We'll start with Mohaza today. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Mohaza. Thank you so much for speaking to us this afternoon. We appreciate you. Panelist, thank you so much for being a panel today. And to our lovely moderator, Sabah Hadley, thank you so much. We'll have closing remarks from our sister Mabrat.
Wow, 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 what a day. Let's give another round of applause for our last panel discussion. I'm just going to share a few closing remarks as they are taking pictures, so just a couple more minutes of your time. Thank you all for your attendance today. I know it was a very long day. but everything we talked about was in line with our theme. Tagada resilience, moving from awareness to action, and doing what we need to do to have those important conversations about building Little Tigray. We started with a mental health awareness panel. We had our convo with Maui Askadom. We talked about the network of Tigrayan communities, women leading change, community building, and then what's next after we continue to fight for the Tigray genocide. And I have to say, all of these panel discussions, we weren't able to have these today if it wasn't for our sister Zuhair. Zuhair planned these panel discussions for us. So thank you to our sister Zuhair. We are so grateful for her. She's here with us in the spirit, and we're so happy the Ibrahim family is here with us as well, so thank you all. So we do have several vendors that we would like you guys to patronize. So as you go out these doors and you see on the slides, these are all the vendors that we have today. Please go purchase their merch. We have TYLV clothing, BY Visuals, Rai, Shop Onjo, Peace, Love, Joy Design, Sherban Collection, Northbridge Connect, Immigrant Mental Health, HPN for Tigray, Zahai, Bahrina, Global Chamber of Commerce, TPN, Wintana Takesta, and Rebuild Tigray. We also have Run for Tigray t-shirts. Don't forget the race is tomorrow morning. If you registered 8 a.m., we have a 5K and we have a 1K, so you can pick up your running badges and purchase your t-shirts. Also, we have Wa'ala merch, so we have an official conference t-shirt. Please buy those because we would like everyone to wear them tomorrow for Family Day. Wear your Wa'ala t-shirt, those are $20 out here as well. The last thing I will say is we'll see you tonight at 8 p.m. So we'll come back here at 8 p.m. We'll have an auction tonight. We'll have awards and recognition, and we'll be announcing the 2023 Wa'ala Tigray host. Also, of course, we have a live concert with our all-star lineup. So we hope to see you in 2 hours. If you remember one of the comments that our brother Hayalum said, we all can do a little bit to help ourselves. And that starts with, before you walk out and go see our vendors, just please pick up a few items off your table and trash them as we walk out. We'll see you in 2 hours. Thank you all.